Welcome, y'all. I'm Deeg. I'm here today chatting with ArenaNet Studio Narrative Director Tom Abernathy. How's it going, Tom?
It's going very well. Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
I'm so pleased to connect with you.
Yeah.
So the way that I have the video framed up, only the very top of your shirt. Can you give it a little? Let's see that shirt. Skritt, 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 Skritt. So before I ask you anything, I gotta ask you to tell me the story about that shirt. What's the deal?
Oh yeah. So this is the shirt that I had made for Christmas presents, holiday presents for the narrative team at ArenaNet in end of the year in 2018. And that was Bobby and I had spent 2 years kind of building the team up to where we wanted it to be, and we were just really thrilled. Everything was humming on all cylinders, and we had a full component of, I think it was full complement of I think it was 17 people all told,
Hmm.
by editors and VO folks, and I just felt like we had all worked really hard because if anybody was familiar with season 4 um, of uh, of Living World, you know that it was an ambitious
Oh my
enterprise,
God,
and
yes.
so I just wanted to give everybody and that was it. It was we're very cohesive and people who used to be on the team and have gone on to other opportunities, usually up the ladder elsewhere,
Hmm.
consider themselves alumni of our team. We all get together and do karaoke from time to time and stuff like that when we're not in the middle of a pandemic. And the shirt, my idea originally in Ritlock and Timey and Caithe or something like that. And
Uh-huh.
Aaron Lindy, who was on our team at the time, was my comedy consultant because he's funnier than I am. And I said, "Is that funny?" He said, "That's funny." And Skritt. And I was like, "Yeah, you're right, you bastard. That is funnier." So we went with that.
Definitely
And
the
I
right
love it, and
choice.
everybody loves it. And yeah,
Definitely the right
it was good.
choice.
It's
I
good.
mean, there's just so much
So
comedy value there. Real quick, Tom. I'm having a couple of periodic drops where I'm losing you, like
okay.
for a second or two. I don't know if you have any ability to like give your internet like a little kick or anything, but if you do, like a little
I have,
Fonzie.
yeah, we had it souped up, and it's not performing a whole lot better than it was before we did that. So I apologize if that's a
That's always
problem
the
that persists.
curse of internet
Yeah,
upgrades. I read I had the same thing happen to me with Comcast recently, where it's like we'll upgrade your internet. And it's like, all right, it runs worse
yes,
than before. What did you change? Change
right.
it back, please.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did. We cut our cable cord, but we said, but we want to go all in on the internet. Give us the highest speed every. Yet still, the
Yeah, yeah. Well,
best laid plans.
we soldier on anyway, don't we?
Yep.
um, okay, so that's a great story about the shirt, and you just told me something about what you do and the team, and I want to dig into that a little bit more. But
Sure.
before we do that, maybe what I could ask is for you to tell me a little bit what the studio narrative director position is about. What is it you do? What are the responsibilities of that role?
Sure, absolutely. So it's a role that only really makes sense, if you have a narrative team that is larger than like two full-time people.
Okay.
Because otherwise, what you need is people more on a lead level and stuff like that who are really all about the making of the thing and the doing of the thing. And certainly,
Hmm.
I participate in all of that. But my primary responsibility is to build a narrative team that is matrixed across different projects. So, for example, right now, across our Living World content, as well as our expansion that everybody knows we're working on called End of Dragons.
Right.
And there's some other stuff going on internally that I can't talk about. And
Sure.
Bobby Stein and I basically we have a staff of, I think at this point it's seven, maybe 6 or 7 full-time writers slash narrative designers. We have 3 editors, one of whom also does some writing, and then there's me and Bobby, and and we like I like having that approach to stuff. I know that it's a little unusual. A lot of studios prefer a team organized matrix. producers particularly really like that, because it puts all of the power over headcount into the hands of the team director or the exec producer or whatever.
For each individual project, that kind of idea.
Yeah, yeah, and
Okay.
I get where they're coming from, but the advantage in doing it the way that I prefer to do it is that rather than leaving people exposed if something should happen, like, as people are aware, we had a layoff a couple of years ago, right? And basically what came down was, I mean, we had 3 or 4 internal projects that were going, and we were told, okay, you're gonna have to cut them, and you don't have to cut specifically the people who are on them, but you have to cut at least an equivalent number of the people who are on them, right? A lot of times people aren't even given that. I would have been told, you're laying those people off.
Right.
The people who were working on those projects. Projects are cut, they're on the street, right? And that sucks. All of us who have worked in this industry, I've been in this industry for 22-ish years, and I've gone through 3 layoffs in various capacities,
Yeah.
and it's just awful. And I can tell you, once I was unaffected, once I was affected, and once I was the person who had to make some of the decisions about who was going to get laid off, and I would by far prefer the first 2 to the third. And so this is one way of hopefully preventing that sort of situation, right? Because as needs ramp up in one part of the company or another, on one project or another, we can sort of go, okay, we need to look forward down the line 6 months and be ready to sort of move some resources, some heads over time. They're going to be spinning up and need more people, and production will be ramping down over on this one, hopefully, and we can sort of figure out how to move the chess pieces around in a way that all the projects' needs are being met, and everybody has enough to do that there's no question that it's absolutely worthwhile keeping them on staff and paying them. And I think it's best for the projects. It's best for the employees themselves, because it gives them more job stability. And then the third thing that it's really awesome for is it enables us to have a process that leverages on behalf of all of our projects the combined mental capacity of all of our folks, right? Because we
Fewer
very much
silos.
employ a writer's room. Yeah, we don't want people siloed off, and I know a lot of companies, I could name names, who make games sort of like ours, and that's what they do. Everybody is like, the expansion team is very much siloed off from the quarterly content team and stuff like that. And to me, that makes absolutely no sense, because if you know how to get the most out of a group of writers, if you know how to create a writer's room environment that is unlike a lot of writers' rooms in Hollywood, that is mutually supportive and trusting, and everybody's rooting for everybody's success, and everybody understands that that they're all in it together. And that once you bring something into the room, it's not really so much just yours anymore, it belongs to the group, and we iterate on it as a group. And it levels up the material really rapidly, and it levels up the people in the room really rapidly. And we have other folks from other disciplines who come sit in, and the only rule is you have to be willing to read, because we're reading scripts out loud. So we'll have designers or even like cinematics or animators come in, and they'll participate in all of that stuff. It's not a closed room. It's an inclusive environment, as long as you're willing to understand the rules of the room. And that is, we're all here to support each other. We're all here to support each other's work, and to also learn from each other and get better watching the iteration on other people's work, which I can be more objective about than I necessarily can if we're looking at my script, right? And it's just got lots of benefits. And so it's worked really well for us. We developed it. It wasn't just my idea. The whole team developed it over my first year at ArenaNet, and it almost instantly started just yielding incredible results. And like I said, both in terms of making the material better and in terms of making the staff better. And so this is why I approach what I do in the way that I do. And I was very fortunate that Mike O'Brien, when he hired me, sort of gave me carte blanche to do that. He didn't tell me how to organize the or how to go about our business. He let me and Bobby figure out what the process was that we wanted to follow, and what the values were that we wanted to hire by, and what mattered to us creatively in terms of the narrative. And And I will always be grateful for giving, for trusting us that much and giving us that space to sort of build something that that has been somewhat unique and certainly successful. And now members of our team, like I said, we've had a number of folks go off to be narrative leads or narrative directors
Yeah.
at other places, and they're taking that process with them and that same approach to everything.
That's beautiful, man.
And oh man, it's all. I mean, it's the best feeling in the world. It really is. To know that people have gotten that much out of it and that they're spreading the word.
That's beautiful. It's like little like spores flying on the wind.
Yeah,
That's
that's exactly what it is. Yes,
that
exactly. Like the
yeah.
cottonwood outside right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched like the Twitter conversation between you and some of the other devs, and it seems like there's just this great sense of fellowship, even that goes beyond, even when you change roles, change companies, all these things.
Yeah,
And that what you're describing completely fleshes out that observation that I've had just as an
yeah,
outsider. That's really cool, man.
yeah.
Um,
No, it is true, and I think that's a thing that is specific to ArenaNet as well. Certainly, not all the places I've ever worked has that dynamic been true, but it is true at ArenaNet.
okay. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I also appreciate what you said about Mike O'Brien. It's so important to have the trust of leadership to be able to
Hmm.
do the things that actually work and make sense,
Yep,
and to be able to have that trust go on down the line, down to the people who are doing the job, making sure that they have um, not just like stability, which is I know a very hot topic in the gaming industry, um,
for sure.
but mobility too. You don't want to get
Mhm.
stuck.
Right,
Uh,
absolutely. And everybody needs new challenges and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, having with that trust from leadership, you can accomplish almost anything.
mhm.
And without it, you're really screwed. It's very hard to accomplish anything at all. Um, you spend so much energy trying to convince someone why they should be saying yes to a thing, why they should be trusting you and your instincts and your expertise, and the fact that there's 15 people who've all come together and agreed this is the decision to make, right?
Right.
Instead of one person, who has succeeded very much in one area of their life, and frequently what happens is people do that and they sort of assume that they can be equally successful and know just as much about other areas that actually aren't their area, right?
Mm.
um, and that is a problem that we face a lot in this business, I think, in this industry, and so it's really awfully nice when you don't.
I'll bet. I'll bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, you hate to be in a position where you got to fight the king instead of fighting the dragon, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because you want to serve the king well, and what you're doing basically is you're saying, "Hey, this is what I think the best way that I can serve you is." Right? I mean,
Mhm.
in my professional opinion, and plus, it's not just me; it's all these other folks. We've all gotten together and discussed it, and this is what makes sense to us. And it is ironic to me. I mean, I get that if you're in leadership, and as someone who is in leadership, I totally understand that point of view. You are also on the hook for a lot of stuff, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you're accountable, or you should be anyway, and so that is a responsibility that someone in our position needs to take seriously. But we also need to understand that we are not here. And this is another part, actually, I guess, of my answer to your original question about
Mhm.
what's the role of a studio narrative director. It is not my job usually to write the thing. It is not my job to get into our tool and implement the dialogue depths. It's not like
Mhm.
I have written stuff when we've been shorthanded, for sure. And I enjoy when I get to, because it's like a little vacation. It's a lot
Right.
easier than most of the rest of my job, right?
Uh-huh.
But I am here to empower other people and to support them and to set them up for success and give them the guidance that they need and a sort of sense of what good looks like,
Mhm.
and then sort of to flick them like a top and let them start spinning and do what they can really do well. I'm not here to do their job for them. That's ridiculous.
Mhm.
And I think there are a lot of people who, no matter how high in the hierarchy they go, they still think, oh, I want to keep getting my hands dirty. I want to get in there and be doing the
I can
detailed
still
stuff
hack
and
it.
doing the work and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just not that's not your role anymore. And if it
Yeah.
is, you need not to be in a lead or a director position.
Yeah.
You need to be in there being an IC. That's totally cool too.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. But in my job, right now, what I love doing, I've got more, more decades of experience creating different kinds of dramatic entertainment in different roles than I care to explicate, and I bring all of that plus 22 years in games, and so I bring all of that to bear in the job that I do, building a team with the instincts and the knowledge and the experience that I have about what will make the strongest kind of team and what kind of people will work best in the environment that I'm trying to create, and imparting to them as much as I can of the stuff that I've picked up over all that time, because most of them have not been working professionally for nearly as long as I have. Certainly not in terms of making dramatic entertainment, and so that's a big part of my value, is sharing that knowledge and that experience over, frankly, 40 plus years, with them, and sharing what I've learned about what kind of standards we should be holding ourselves to, and what kinds of stories are important, and how important it is to be, at ArenaNet, we're very fortunate. This is a chicken or egg kind of thing. I don't know exactly how it started, because obviously I came in 5 years after Guild Wars 2 had launched, right? Or four years. But but one of the things that always amazed me, I'd played GW2 a little bit when it came out, but not a ton. And one of the things that has amazed me as I really immerse myself in the player community is how diverse and inclusive and supportive our player community is. I mean, obviously there are toxic elements at times. Any game community is like that, but I was astonished. I have been astonished constantly at the incredible kindness and love and openness and inclusivity, by and large, that our players show. I remember early on, some people probably heard me tell this story, early on when I was doing some stuff, sort of reacquainting myself with the game. I was playing through the Sylvari personal story because I hadn't done Sylvari before. And at one point you have to go find the pale tree. And I'm like looking around for 30 minutes trying to find the pale tree. I don't see a tree anywhere. I'm standing right on top of the star on the map, right?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, there's like 75 other player characters running around having open world, right? So finally, I sort of lost patience, and I kind of did a little wave emote, and I said, "Can somebody help me?" Of course, I wasn't going to tell them I worked for can somebody help me? I tried to find the pale tree, and I don't know where it is. It's like the noobiest question ever. And within 10 seconds, probably 6 or 7 people ran over to me and were not just like, "Oh yeah, the pale tree, by the way, it's 40 feet below you. You've got to drop through the hole there." But like, they were like,
walk off this plank.
"Welcome." Right. But they were like, "Welcome. Do you understand the sort of horizontal, how to set up your deck stuff? And let me teach you how to play the game. I can meet you again tomorrow night." And all this stuff. And I never experienced that. I mean, hell, I've been at Riot for a while. I'd never experienced that. And not that
ready
it's
to
Riot's
welcome
fault, don't get
you.
me wrong. I know. Talking about league, the league community is, I think everyone knows, less like that than
it's a
than
competitive
we wish.
game. Competition is the heart
It's a
of it.
competitive game. That's right.
Right.
It attracts people like that, and that's cool. But anyway, so I've been amazed at that. I've been amazed at how diverse our player base is compared to some others. We have a much higher percentage of women, of people of color, of folks who identify as queer in some way, and they show our love. They show their love openly to us, on the forums, on Reddit, on social media. And so we feel a responsibility to give that love back, to represent them in the game and make them feel seen and heard. One of the things that I'm proudest of, although I had absolutely nothing to do with it because I came in halfway through Path of Fire, but I mean, we've got more black hairstyles in Path of Fire and now available for PCs than any other game by a factor of 4, I think, at least, right? Like, and that's so cool. And we have had black players, get in touch with us and go, "This means so much to me."
Right.
It means so much to me to have those options available, right?
Yeah.
And my wife is black, my daughter is mixed race, and I know what it's like, because I used to like when my daughter was 6 or 7. I'm like looking for games we can play together and stuff like that might have faces like hers in the game, and they're not so easy
That's
to
everything
come by.
if you're a kid. Seeing someone who
It
looks
is.
like you. Yeah.
It absolutely is. And so our player base is incredible in that way. And so I know that we, and certainly on my team, we feel the joyful obligation
Yeah.
to respond to that, not just with visual representation and cultural representation, which we do our best with, but also with representation in terms of staff, so that perspectives and experiences and voices that are not the standard straight white dude kind of stuff, get into the game. And probably the thing I'm proudest of, and there's a lot that I'm proud of that the team has accomplished in the time that I've been there. But probably if I had to pick one thing, it is that. It is the fact that I think we've hired either 12 or 14 people in the time I've been at ArenaNet over the last 4+ years at this point.
Okay.
Even split exactly of men and women. Nobody identified as genderqueer openly, so I don't know that we had that. But
Okay.
at least a third were people of color, and at least 3 or 4 identified as queer, and that was part of why we wanted them. That was part of their qualification for the job. And sometimes people don't understand that when I say it, and they're like, whoa, wait a second, what is that? Quota system, blah, blah. No. It's because those people, somebody like that who has an experience that's different from someone who looks like me, is bringing different ideas that I would not have for stories, for characters, for themes, right? We hired Novira King, who is a Black Muslim woman, and she and Julia Narden started working on Icebrood Saga, and cooked up this amazing allegory about white nationalism and all of the stuff that was going on outside during the Trump administration. But it's with Char, right? And
it's
I
perfect.
promise you, I would never.
It's like the sci-fi fantasy dream. It's what it's good for.
It's exactly what it's good for. That's what Star Trek has always been so great for, right? Is and science fiction and fantasy, like you can use those things to have conversations and go in depth about stuff in our own world, but in a way that doesn't feel so frightening or threatening to some folks because it's clothed in a slightly different look. And I would never have had that idea. I wouldn't have. I'm happy to say I would never. It's a great idea. I wish I would have it. I would never have it. The fact that they had it, and the fact that that Novira, as a lead, executed on it so, I think, impressively. It's a great example of a thing that's gone on, which is we've made that effort. We've tried to tell those stories. I think more often than not, we've told some. We're always looking to get more diverse and to tell more stories that represent the experiences of different people. Oh my gosh, I can't wait for people to get to Caithe. I mean,
tease me, Tom.
Holy cow! I don't want to like.
Who's more wound up about it? Am I more wound up about it, or are you more wound up about it? I bet you are.
Oh, dude, and again, this is not because I'm like the guy. I'm so excited. I'm losing all of my AirPods. It's not like I'm the guy. I've done some writing on it, but mostly I've just sat back and watched our writers and the content designers and the artists and animators and cinematics folks come up with the most amazing stuff. And I don't want to overhype it because I don't want,
expectations.
But I'm very excited.
Yeah.
I'm very excited. I'm very proud of everybody who's working on it. And I will say this. The thing I love maybe most about it is whatever you think it's going to be, whatever you may be expecting, especially folks who played Guild Wars 1 and played factions, be prepared for it not to be exactly what you're expecting.
Oh, man.
That's all I'll say.
I love the sound of that. All right.
Well, that's the challenge, right? How do you give people a thing that they want, but not in a way that they expected?
Yeah.
So it also feels new.
I listened to a talk you did with some other narrative folks, Chris Avalone and some others I don't remember, talking about how to approach sequels.
Oh gosh, that's from a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like it's a similar kind of problem. Is how do you give something to people that they already love, iterate on it in a way that they're going to care about still, without forgetting about the thing that made the first thing good, right?
Yep.
How do you do that?
That's true. Well, and I suspect, I don't remember exactly when that panel was, but I suspect that it was that I was probably mostly talking about Destroy All Humans 2.
Okay.
as my personal experience of that. I might also have been talking about Halo Reach, but in so many ways,
I
that
think that
game is
sounds
not really
right.
as yeah. I mean, that game isn't exactly a sequel; it's actually a prequel
Right.
to the numbered Halo games, and it doesn't feature Master Chief or Cortana, so it's it's really its own thing. But
Mhm.
but back when we did Destroy All Humans 2, and so this is 2006,
Okay.
2007. Social media did not exist in the way that it does now. I mean, Facebook. I'm not sure
Mhm.
if Facebook was even open to the general public yet, and
If you
and
were
and
a college
certainly
student at certain schools, you could get in.
you
Me,
had it. That's right. That's right. But it
I
was
was just learning about it at that time. I remember.
yep, yep. But there was no Twitter. There was no
Mhm.
Insta or all of these other things that are now such a part of our
Yeah.
lives.
No HD streaming
And
video
so
anywhere.
that's right. And I will say those things have helped, and things like Reddit have helped make it a lot easier for us to put our finger quickly on the pulse of what our players are
Mhm.
saying and
Mhm.
thinking, and what they say they want, at least,
Mhm.
and how they feel about a thing. And that's awesome. In 2006, we didn't have that. And uh, so when we were making Destroy All Humans 2, um, quickly, for those who don't know, if you haven't ever played the franchise, Destroy All Humans is basically, the original pitch was it's Mars Attacks, except you play the alien. And that's a
Right.
pretty good idea of
I
what it
love.
is, right? You,
It's a cool
you,
pitch.
yeah. You play the alien in a flying saucer, comes down to Earth in the first game in the 50s,
Uh-huh.
basically to retrieve DNA by anally probing people and yanking their brain stems out for reasons I
It's
won't
good,
go into
wholesome
it.
stuff.
That's right. That's right. It's good American fun, and it's it's got these two that are called Furons, Crypto and Pox, and they have kind of a Crypto has a sort of Jack Nicholson slash Charlton Heston kind of voice, and
Uh-huh.
very much is sort of the little American id running around,
Mhm.
the rugged individualist, breaking all the rules, and all that kind of stuff. And Pox is sort of like the M to his James Bond, up in the mothership, always, convention
Right.
thing.
Right.
And but telling him where to go. And so the first game came out, and people were really happy with it, and that was great. THQ was happy with it, Pandemic was happy with it. THQ bought ads on the NBA finals every night. And
Wow.
they did an
Many
amazing ad campaign.
times.
Yeah, yeah. Well, really, yeah. I mean, it's the sort of stuff that at the time you just didn't see very much, and,
Yeah.
and so we were all just astonished. But so we were really gratified by that, and so of course both THQ wanted us to rush a sequel into production, and we were only
Mhm.
going to have, like, I think 18 to 20 months or something to do it, and that was
Ooh.
okay because we had a head start in a lot of ways. The team was still together, and
Mhm.
and so we actually had started talking even before the decision was made to make a sequel about what we might want to do. And I remember that the lead designer and I were emailing. They were in Australia, and so in 2006, 2005, 2006, it wasn't like we did video stuff like
No
this
Zoom.
much. Mostly it was or the occasional trans-Pacific phone call.
Uh-huh.
And we were just sort of enjoying the fact that it seemed like it was going to be a hit, and
Mhm.
batting ideas back and forth. And he said, I think we should build on the idea of their relationship, Crypto and Pox, being a little bit James Bond and M. And
Mhm.
in the next game, they should go to the 60s, and he should be James Bond, basically. And we can sort of send up, the swing and mod scene in London and San Francisco in the Summer of Love and all this other stuff. And
Mhm.
I said, I think that sounds great. I love James Bond movies. They're lots of fun. It
Mhm.
seemed like a very right place to go, because to us, the crux of the fun of the experience was Crypto and Pox and their relationship.
Right.
We have two marvelous voice actors in Richard Horvath and Grant Albrecht, playing those roles, and they were just so good. And we loved them, and we thought that's what this is what stories are about. They're about, and I felt very strongly about characters. People love the characters.
Right.
They'll follow the characters wherever we go. So we did that. We made that game.
Mm.
And there are other complicating factors that I won't go into because they're not particularly relevant to the point that I'm making. But
Okay.
the game came out, and it didn't do badly. It sold right around the same number of copies that the first game had sold. But if you know how the video game business works, that's not how it's supposed to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
You hope that you make more money on the sequel while spending less resource-wise so that your profit margin gets wider the more of them you make.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't necessarily happen in a big way on Destroy All Humans 2. Not so much that THQ wanted to stop the series, but enough that it gave us, the team, a little pause.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that in late focus groups before it was released, and it was really too late to do anything about this, I remember one of the things that had come up repeatedly that people kept asking in the focus group was, where's the theremin? And if people don't know, the theremin
The
is
ooey
this
sound?
yes, it's an instrument from the 40s. That to call it an instrument is almost too grand a word. It's basically two wires with electromagnetic current going through them, and the instrumentalist waves their hands between them, and you change the pitch on one axis and the volume on another axis, and you can
Yeah,
you're seeing a
yeah,
flying saucer mover from the 50s. That's the sound you associate with it.
right.
And we were like, why do they keep bringing up the theremin? What does that have to do with anything, right? And what we realized, because sometimes you have to kind of, like focus groups will speak in code that you have to break. They don't know necessarily how to articulate what the thing is they really feel, but they give you what they
Yeah.
can, and then you have to figure out what it means. And after thinking about it, what we came to realize was that what they meant was they loved the setting of the first game too, and they loved the whole 50s flying saucer movie shtick, and
Mm.
they loved the coming into conservative, buttoned up Eisenhower, Leave It to Beaver
Ah,
America, and finding out all the depraved thoughts that everybody was thinking in their heads about
right.
how they were going to go shoot up and go see the mistress. All of that, my mind says Marilyn Monroe, but my body says Rock Hudson stuff, right? And because we had a whole litter of those jokes,
Uh-huh.
and so it wasn't just Pox and Crypto.
Mm.
Like they loved those characters too, but there was more to it than that. And we had abandoned largely by going to the 60s some of the elements that they most loved. And part of that was because we had never really asked them before we decided what we were going to make.
Mm.
We didn't run it by them,
Mm-hmm.
right? By focus groups or anybody. And again, lack of social media, difficult to get any feedback.
Yeah, yeah.
But the lesson that I took from that, and I'm sure this is what I said in a panel, was that it's really important when you're making another game in a franchise, which nowadays most of us do most of the time.
Right.
Original IP, at least at the AAA level, are unusual. And so most of us are going to be working on those things a lot. And it's important when you're deciding what the next thing is going to look like
Uh-huh.
that you really do some considered and humble research with players to make sure you fully understand what they loved about the first thing or what they've loved about the series
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
before. I think that in that time we didn't have access to the players in the same way, and so we didn't realize yet how vital a piece of input stuff like that could be in terms
Mm-hmm.
of figuring out how to make something they would enjoy, right?
Right. Right.
Um, and so that was what I took away from it, and I've always tried to remember that ever since, and
Mm-hmm.
it's served me pretty well most of the time.
Okay. Okay. Now, that's a great story and makes a lot of sense. Is it fair of me to make a mental connection between that story and to make a connection between End of Dragons and Guild Wars 1 factions? Is there a theremin of Guild Wars factions of Caithe?
Interesting,
Is there such a thing?
interesting. Well, I guess we'll find out.
There it is.
Right? I mean, um, obviously, I can't get very much at all into what's going on with End of Dragons, but I will say, I think that if and certainly since I was a part of the group that tried to figure out what we should do, at
Mhm.
least I brought that perspective to the conversation for
Uh-huh.
sure. I think that we're aware of what Guild Wars factions players liked about it. I think we're also aware, in the same way that we were when we were doing Path of Fire, that it's a different world today than it was then. Should have been a different world then, and that we have a sophisticated, a more evolved understanding of the idea of cultural sensitivity, and and of our being conscious of that, very conscious, very sort of front of mind as we went into this. I think that, and again, I'm not mostly taking credit for what I'm about to say because I didn't come in until the middle of the production process for Path of Fire, but I think that the team, even by the time I got in, had done a great job getting their heads on straight about how to approach Africa, right? Which is a continent that's a lot bigger than most people realize. Like, you could fit Europe and North America into Africa and still have some land left over. The cultures there are many and complex and diverse, and there are religious things to keep in mind as well about some of them, and to go into the idea of, we have a part of our world that is inspired by Africa, and how do we do that justice, and how do we serve our Black players, first of all, adequately, so that they feel seen and represented, and not like we're taking them to Epcot or some theme park version of that, right? That was a thing I could tell when I walked in the door and looked around at what was going on. I could tell that people had asked those questions, and they were the right questions to ask. And I won't be so arrogant as to say that I think we got every single thing right, but I think it was clear we were trying to. I think people, anything that we slipped on, people gave us the benefit of the doubt to a large degree, because it was clear we wanted to serve it respectfully and in the right way. And we had folks in the studio, who had Arabic heritage, or whose families were in other ways, family heritage was connected to Africa, or cultures in Africa in different ways. And they certainly, we used them constantly as resources. And they were helping make the game. They were making the game. But whenever we, for names, if we needed another name, we turned to Heather Conover, whose family is connected to North Africa, and say, this kind of character and stuff like this. And she was a wonderful source of knowledge, sorts of cultural things having to do with that. So we are, again, I can't go into anything specific, but obviously we're aware of how we feel like we succeeded with Path of some ways in which we could have done better. And we want to try to do better, this go around, as we again enter that could, present some challenges, and that we have responded to, and it's more complicated, frankly, even, I think, in some ways. And so that's, what I can say is, we're, the way we approached Path of Fire, we learned from that too, and are using that in the way that we're approaching End of Dragons.
Gotcha.
I hope that sort of answers your question.
It does. Well, yeah. I mean, I gave you a tough one. I
mean, I don't know. The Theramins, it's a good question, and we'll find out. Like I said, I mean, I hope that there won't be one. I hope people will go, wow, that's everything I wanted, and then there was all this that I never knew I wanted, right?
No,
but we'll find out.
I'm excited as a long-time Guild Wars 2 player. I played Guild Wars 1 back in college. I'm excited to get back there and find out both what I remember, and also things that are new. Both those things are important to have.
It's been 114 years.
Right.
Just saying.
Right. And the mind goes wild. Well, Tom, I really I'm also connecting something else you said about diversity, right? So I watched a talk that you gave at GDC. I don't remember how long ago it was, but you talked about the why it makes good business sense to care about diversity. It's a great talk. People should watch it.
Special Sauce is what it's called if you're looking in the vault. It's about 10 years ago, I think.
Yeah. And what I saw you doing in that talk was taking pains to to surface numbers that painted the same picture you already instinctually felt about why diversity was worthwhile, not just for moral reasons or ethical reasons, but for actual business reasons. And what I hear you talking about in Path of Fire seems to be almost like a payoff. It's like if you have that diversity of perspective on the team, you can represent the diversity of people who are wanting to engage with the material out in the world. People can see themselves, they can see their kids, they can see the people they know and love in the content. I think that's really wonderful.
Yeah, well, and well put on your part. That's probably a better way of putting it all than I could have. It's that is absolutely what I believe in and what I think the value of it is. And you're right to connect those things. This has been that's been a drum that I've been banging for a long time because there are so many people I love who are not cis white guys,
Right.
and but who play games.
Hmm.
And you might remember if you watched that, then you saw the pictures of my daughter at the time
Yeah.
playing her Connect games. She was, I think, 6 years old or 7 years old, and now she's 15, going on 16.
Uh-huh.
And it hasn't gotten enough better. I will say, what has happened is, it's funny. Like on Twitter yesterday, today, I saw this big tweet that was going around where somebody was like putting out numbers about how big the percentage of women playing on PlayStation 5 is compared to how many played PlayStation 4 and 5
Hmm.
compared to how many played in the ones previous to that. And it was a larger percentage. And my
Okay.
response to that, which I tweeted, was, yes, I hope people heard that when I said it 9 years ago in the talk you're talking about, and put out the numbers, right?
Hmm.
Because if you factored in mobile gaming and casual gaming at that time,
Yeah.
there already were more female players in the
Yes.
world than males, and the astonishing slowness of the industry to recognize how incredibly swiftly and completely the nature of people who play games has changed. Not just the numbers,
Right.
but we have people now. I'm old enough because when they do those memes online, where people say, tweet with the first game controller you had, and that shows how old you are without saying how old you are, right? And
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me, I'm
Yeah.
like, Pong. What do you want me to put for Pong? I don't know. I was there when the first one came out.
Little joystick.
You
Right.
know, there are people who there's been a PlayStation for their whole lives,
Uh-huh.
of one sort or another, right? I mean, everybody up to the age of 55 now grew up with video games
Yeah.
in one way or another.
Yep.
And that is a different world. And as we know, in terms of America, at the same time, our country has been getting browner and blacker and more gender and sexuality complex and wider
Pluralistic.
spectrum
Yeah.
of identification.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but they still play games where, I mean, they're all still human
They're all
beings
people.
and
Yeah.
Americans grown up with that stuff, right? I mean, um, so I act like I don't know what the answer why that has not happened more. Why the industry has been so slow to respond to that.
Okay.
But that's not true. I know what the answer is, and the answer is that those people were not the people in positions of power making decisions.
Hmm.
And that's the thing that changes stuff. So
Right.
that's why, again, as you heard me talk about earlier, part of my sense of mission is I go out and find people from underrepresented groups who have talents and vision and incredible potential that could be brought to bear in the sphere of video game, making narrative based video games. And they're not necessarily the people who are going to apply.
Hmm.
So we have to go look for them in places where they may be. It is a truism. Some folks who are listening, I'm sure, will know this. It is a truism that cis white men will see a job posted with 5 qualifications that it asks for, 5 requirements, they'll say, even though
Uh-huh.
there's nothing's ever a requirement.
Job
Don't pay attention
descriptions.
to that stuff. But yes, but that's what it says, requirements.
Yeah.
And there's 5 of them. And your average cis white guy, is what Novira calls overconfident white boys,
Uh-huh.
will look at that and go, hey, I matched 2 of those 5. I am applying for this gig. Right.
It's
Whereas
true. It's
people
true.
who Whereas people who don't fit that description don't feel that same sense of confidence about it, and will go, oh, well, I only match 4 of those 5, so I guess I shouldn't apply because there's no way I'm ever going to get it, right?
Right.
So we have expanded on our team what the qualifications are. And we have abandoned some things that some folks in the industry have long held as absolute requirements. I know some very big companies with very big game franchises who, if you interview with them, you better be a level X whatever like player of their game. Because if you're not, they're not interested, and you need to go away and play the game for 300 hours until you reach that level, and then you can come back and maybe they'll give you the time, right?
Seems so dumb. Sorry.
It is dumb. People hiring in this business, they seem to care about, have you worked on a game just like mine? Do you know my game inside and out?
Right.
Stuff like this. And I'm like, I can teach that stuff. That stuff can be learned in a month. You know what I mean? There's nothing. Honestly, we hired Julia Narden, and she came on, and she knew Guild Wars lore better than I did within a month.
Sure.
And she'd never worked in games before, but she had worked in interactive immersive theater, creating live immersive theater experiences in non-traditional places, which turns out to be a really good skill set for making
so interesting
narrative video games, right?
I had no idea.
So it's like think about what you want to hire for and what you don't. I'm not gonna waste my time prioritizing things that can be taught or learned fairly readily and easily.
Right.
I need to spend my effort searching for and hiring for the things that cannot. Because that's a thing I'm not going to be able to supply. Bobby's not going to be able to supply. We need people to come in.
Basic material.
With we need people to come in with a pretty developed sense of how to write dramatic material for actors who are speaking, because that's a thing that Guild Wars traffics in, and you're not going to learn it in a year, right? You need to have spent years building up those muscles. You don't have to have worked in video games, but you have to have played a ton of video games, and you have to have thought about what it would be like as a person who creates in other media to take your skills and apply them to video games, which most people will have done if that's
if you
just like I did when I was when I was right out of film school, right, and I was trying to be a screenwriter at the same time I'm playing games, and I'm like, the story is terrible because I cared about the story, but it was 1997, and stories in games were mostly terrible.
True.
And then our third criterion is good collaboration skills, because life's too short to work with jerks. So those are our three. Those are our 3 criteria. Those are the things that are non-negotiable. Everything else is negotiable. And if you are bringing a perspective of any kind, we just hired an English guy. If you're bringing a perspective that's different from that of everybody else on the team, that is a big point in your favor. That is, we actively want that. We find value in all those things.
Absolutely. I love that. The question of how to distinguish between what are the ephemera and trappings of like the things that are correlated with the people who can do the work versus the things that are actually intrinsically important, and to be able to separate those out.
That's a great way of putting it. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
It takes a really discerning eye, I think, to do that anywhere you go.
It does. And the other thing that always strikes me about the companies who are like, do you know our game? Have you played 1,000 hours of our game? Is it's like, that's such a self-serving question. All they're saying is, are you ready to, buff me up and make me feel really like awesome because of how great you think I am? I mean, it's not about you. Come on.
Well, it's like saying, I can have anyone I want. Why should I pick you?
That's exactly what it is. That's right. That's right. And I hate that attitude. I hope anybody who's ever interviewed with us, even just for our mentorship program, I hope would say that the attitude they feel from us is, hey, you might be awesome. I want to give you every possible opportunity to show me how awesome you might be. Right? That's how I feel. I'm all about the potential, man.
Yeah.
Right? I don't need you to tell me what I've done. I know what I want to know, what you have in you that could be of value and of use. And if you've got it, I'm going to give you every possible opportunity to show it to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you going to make us more dangerous?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a good rule of thumb with management and hiring that, if you're not hiring somebody who's better than 50% of the people in your team, and better is a slippery term, but who doesn't level your team up in that way,
Mhm.
why are you hiring them?
Mm.
Right? Because the goal should always be to be raising the level of the team. And to some degree that just happens through
Over
their own
time.
development, which is
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you want new hires to bring that, to, as Bobby likes to say, not just to be a culture fit, but a culture add. You
Oh,
know,
yeah, I like that.
yeah, it's a thing we talk about a lot on our team. We're very conscious of it.
That's cool. Can you indulge me? Can you tell me a little bit about how you and Bobby work together? I had the joy of talking to Bobby a couple months ago,
Yeah.
and at talking to him and talking to you, like I want to know, like, what's it look like for you guys to collaborate?
I wish I could hear him answer that question first.
Oh, I see.
No, no, no. I will look. We were talking about this before we started. Bobby Stein is
Uh,
one of the great human beings. He's as decent a human being as you will ever find, and I'm very fortunate. I was very fortunate on walking in the door for him to
mm,
partner with. And that's what he's been since literally before I even actually started on the job. We were getting together, giving me the lay of the land, sort of identifying things that were on fire were and how we were going to putting them.
mhm,
And I think from the beginning we have done a really good job of sort of we have our values are completely aligned. So there's that.
mhm,
We both understand what it is we want the team to look like. Over time, we've both become better aligned on what good looks like in terms of what we want to make sure stands. I am a person who a lot of my value, I won't say all, a lot of my value is on the creative side, as I made reference to before. The fact that I've worked literally for over 4 decades in several different dramatic entertainment media as
yeah.
an actor, as a director, as a writer, even as a musician and composer. I come to every creative project that I work on, no matter what it is and what role I'm playing on it, I bring all of that experience to it, much of which, as you might imagine, has been about, okay, I know how to do X in A environment, and now
Mhm,
I need to create a thing in B environment and learn how to do Y. How do I learn the things that I know? How do I put those over and use those to sort of figure out how to go about solving the challenge that is narrative in video games? Because when I came in to this industry, the phrase narrative designer did not exist. There was no one for me to ask how to do my job because no one had done it yet. And
yeah.
so
That's
I was
so
feeling
interesting.
my way every day. It was crazy writing the first Astral Humans teams in Australia. I'm in my in Van Nuys, and I like to tell people I felt like I was putting a jigsaw puzzle together with my hands in a black bag. I couldn't see the pieces. And it was amazing. What an exciting experience that was, and challenging, and having to figure out, oh my God, this is branching and nonlinear and
Mhm,
interactive, and I can't do some stuff that I'm used to doing in a
right.
screenplay in this context. And of course, as somebody who played games, like I quickly grasped the truth of that,
Mhm,
as I would sort of come up against challenges. And then I would realize, okay, I'm just going to have to think my way out of this. I'm going to have to invent my way out of this because there's
okay.
nobody to ask. There's no book to turn to.
Yeah, there's no authority.
And that, yeah, exactly. And that's what it's been like to one degree or another the whole time I've been games for the last 20 plus years. And I love that about it. It's the reason that I
Mhm,
sort of stopped and committed myself fully to games because I really love that. And boy, I got way away from Bobby's and my partnership, but
That's alright.
basically I bring all of that. That's when I'm in a room with our writers and even some folks from other disciplines, giving them the benefit of that, not telling them what to do. It's not my job, again, to dictate choices. it's
Right,
it's my
right.
job to illuminate their idea of what choices they should
Sure,
be considering,
sure.
right? And Jason Vandenberg used to say that he thought my superpower is synthesis, which I think is actually pretty
Mm,
true. I've always felt very guilty as a writer
hmm,
because I feel like I'm not a real writer. Like I know writers who, if they don't get out of bed and write 5,000 words a day, they feel physically ill.
Huh.
Like Richard Dansky at Red Storm is a good friend of mine, is like that. That's never been me. I'm like more like screenwriters are, which is I hate writing a lot of the time. I love having written. There's nothing more satisfying than seeing 120 pages of a thing sitting on your desk. But I've always, I came into film school as a director. I'd been a theater director. I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I got into screenwriting as a way of making material for myself to direct, because it was the mid '90s and everybody wanted to be Quentin Tarantino and Spike Lee.
Sure.
And I found out that I really loved screenwriting in a way that I'd never enjoyed trying to write prose fiction. And I loved the challenge of all of those things, and figuring out, once I got into games, things like just tools that used to be in my writer's kit if I'm writing a screenplay, which simply aren't in the context of a lot of video games, right? Okay. Control. It all comes down to control. Control over sequence, control over pacing. If you're giving the player the power to make some choices about how all this stuff is going to play out, you are giving, by necessity, you're giving that power up, and you have to figure out how to achieve the same kinds of effects in terms of a satisfying dramatic experience with that you want to, without those things. And interestingly,
you're diluting
small
your
plug
agency
for my current,
over the storytelling.
yeah,
right?
small plug for my current side project, just because it's relevant. I'm currently am part of a group that's doing a virtual theater / film / game project called Chekhov OS. Which is a deconstruction, basically, of Anton Chekhov's work, in a virtual and to some degree interactive and live environment. It can be enjoyed virtually from the comfort of your own home in these pandemic times. That's why we're doing it. It's not a live theater project, although it does involve some live performers. And if you're interested in checking it out, you can go to ChekhovOS.art, ChekhovOS.art. It gets specifically into these questions because they've always been fascinating ones to me, and they were interesting to the guy who conceived the piece.
Cool.
Of when you give up, people are used to making theater, used to making movies, used to making television. You have to give up some of the control, and that's scary. And it's also, for those of us who make games, it's super exciting, and figuring out how I still make you walk away going, God, that was a great experience. It touched me emotionally. It moved me. These characters, I loved them. How do I do that without having as much control as I normally would, right? So this is the side that's mostly my area of expertise, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, more the creative juice. I heard you say the word synthesis too, which suggests to me that you're like, maybe you're the guy in the room who hears all the good ideas and can find how they connect.
Yes, precisely. So that's why I always feel like my dirty little secret is that I'm not really a writer. I'm a director. Because that is, I think Jason was very actually insightful when he said that. I hadn't thought of it like that, but I am not necessarily the guy who's going to have all of the genius ideas. I will have my share occasionally, but I am more helpful in the room, and certainly in the role I'm in now, if I'm the guy sort of listening to the discussion and then going, hey, okay, that thing you just said, what if we take that and we pair it up with that thing you said 4 minutes ago, and then we wrap them together and we twist it like this, right? And I'm also constantly aware of some basic principles that are important to me creatively, a lot of which comes from my acting training, a lot of which is like Stanislavski derived, the importance of making unexpected choices, the importance of subtext rather than focusing on text and dialogue, as Stanislavski said. People don't say what they actually mean, which is why if you read a Chekhov play, it can be really off-putting, because, or it's like reading Pinter. It's like, well, what's happening here? I don't understand what's going on. And then that's because all of the action and emotion and what's going on is subtext, and sometimes you have to. It has to be done out loud. It has to be done live in order for that stuff to emerge and become clear, right? So all these principles are things that I try to sort of bring to the process and teach folks. And I'm crappy at hardcore managerial stuff, organizational stuff. Like, I definitely have some good leadership skills, but they're more the soft skill kind of things, I think, if that's the phrase. And so Bobby, who's a terrific writer and certainly has a great creative mind, as well, and is responsible, frankly, for more than probably a lot of people realize under the hood creatively. He, though, is, I think, he's a better manager in terms of the nuts and bolts than I am. He's a more experienced manager, frankly, in some ways, and he covers that side. We have a really good way of sort of dividing the responsibilities so that everything is getting covered. And he his ability to do that frees me up to be able to focus more on being in rooms where creative conversations are being held, and helping to sort of facilitate those and make sure that 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 the potential of them is maximized. He is entirely responsible for our mentorship program. It was his idea.
What a cool thing.
The focus is to the focus is to find folks who are from underrepresented groups in the industry, and to help them get on a level playing field in terms of trying to get into the industry. And it's been super successful, and we've hired people out of it. Other companies, we've had lots of success with people going on to jobs in other companies. But part of it is, as I realized it when we still had Armin Constantine, who now is the narrative director at Insomniac, one of the people who left our group and went on to glory like that. We the three of us, he and Armin and Bobby were the ones who mostly did the first mentorship program. And at some point, I opened my eyes and went, you know what? It's interesting. It just occurred to me that all three of us are married to women of color, and that's probably not an accident. In terms of us caring about this stuff, right?
Sure.
I'd never thought about it before, but it was true. And so that doesn't mean that we have all insight into the experiences of people of color. It just means that we know enough that we know we should be trying to make sure that we're aware of those things.
Yeah.
And
well, you've lived the effects in ways that others haven't. And you understand the viscerality of that more than
certainly others. You see it. Yeah, no question. And for the past 6 years, ever since Michael Brown, all the way up to George Floyd, and yesterday, my house, issues of how people of color are treated by police in America is a thing that I have a window into that most white guys don't, and I recognize it.
I wouldn't, honestly.
I'm not trying to glamorize it or give myself any credit or anything. It's just it's a fact that I get to see perspectives that I wouldn't necessarily have firsthand access to, right?
No, I think there's truth in what you say. I think that it can be very easy for us to sympathize with things that are like things we've experienced in life, and very hard to sympathize with things that are not close to what we've experienced.
And to assume that our experience is the norm, right? I think that's a big part of the problem. We well-meaning white people, white men especially, have assumed that our experience was the norm for a long time, when, oh my God, anything but. And once you get your eyes open to that, it's not a thing you can unsee, frankly.
Yeah. And then with that knowledge comes a responsibility to try to find a way to act in a way that brings that nudges the vector of reality in the right direction. And
I think so.
I'd love to hear what you're doing with the diversity initiatives, and honestly, it just sounds like I love how connected up all of it is. That's really great.
Yeah, and again, people, some people will go, well, it's just political correctness or something.
People do that.
My response to that is no. That is not the case. First of all, watch Generation on HBO Max. The world is changing. Our country is changing rapidly in terms of young people coming up. And my daughter, 15-year-old, so I'm seeing it firsthand every day. It is a matter of. It's not a matter of political correctness or any other stupid catchphrase like that. It is a matter of recognizing and not feeling, this is the important thing, not feeling responsible for, right? It's not like, look, I'm a white guy from Atlanta whose family's on both sides were in North Georgia for going back 200 years.
Okay.
And on one side, I'm pretty sure probably owning slaves at some point or something like that. Okay, that's not my fault. I didn't do that, but I have enjoyed, living in a system that was built on that, and that privileges and advantages people like me. So I could be an uncompassionate person and go, that sucks to be y'all.
Right.
Yoink. But that's not who I am. Yeah. I'm a person, part of why I do what I do is because I'm a person who has a heart and who feels things and has empathy and compassion and who knows and loves people who those conditions have hurt in various ways, and who live under a reality that is different from mine when they walk out of the house every day.
Right.
I guess if we're talking about Breonna Taylor, even if they don't walk.
Yeah.
And so I have, I'll say it again the way I put it before. I have a happy responsibility. I have a joyful obligation.
Right.
To be aware of that and to do what I can to begin to make that situation right. I cannot make it right all on my own. That will never happen. But again, speaking as somebody from Atlanta, who wished when I was a teenager for it to start becoming what what Georgia seems to be becoming now. Watching what's going on there is the most homesick I've ever been, and I haven't 27 years. I part of me so wants to go back and be a part of the incredible changes that are happening there because it's still not. Everything's still under battle, right? There's a battle going on there, and I feel both a love of the place, a desire to see it be what it could be, and also a responsibility to help make that happen. I can't literally do that bodily and physically there, so I'll do it from where I sit here in my little ways in my work, or in the other small sort of ways that I can hopefully have some impact on the world. But I very much, and I know Bobby thinks this way too. We believe that. We believe in taking that thought and those values with us into every part of what we do professionally as well. And that's not anything anybody ever told us to do. But it is something that at ArenaNet, since I've been there at least, we all look at each other and we say that out loud. We say, this is basically what we believe in. And these are things that matter to us, and we know they matter to our players. And, there aren't a lot of video game companies who are willing to sort of in a substantive way kind of put their money where their mouth is and make games that support that worldview. And we want to be one that does, because our players expect and deserve no less.
Yeah.
So
yet the hope is right. No one's doing it yet. Like the spores flying out, right?
Little bits, and the indie world is a different thing, obviously. And I know there are a jillion examples. But again, all of my experience in games has been in the AAA space.
Right.
So that's sort of what I think about. And I look around, and it's not yet still what I want it to be, what I wanted it to be 20 years ago. But just like Georgia, it's bit by bit. Maybe we're making a little progress.
All right, Georgia peaches coming along.
Cons, baby, peanuts. Fun trivia fact: peaches are not Georgia's top crop. Peanuts are.
Aren't peaches from South Carolina? I remember
that's
that right?
Correct. Peaches are the top crop in South Carolina. Yes.
I lived in South Carolina for a number of years, and that's one of the trivia facts that I picked up, as well as a deep affection for the word "y'all," which took me a while as a New England boy growing up, moving down there when I was a teenager. It took me a while to accept it, but it's a beautiful word.
It worms your way into your bones until it's just like you can't get away from it. It's funny because I'm a big Atlanta Braves fan, and I've just discovered Braves Twitter in the last year and a half, and I discovered that the degree to which I code switch on Twitter, depending on whether I'm talking to my Braves fam or I'm talking to game people and movie people, stuff like that. I had no idea the extent to which I change up the way that I express myself.
I've seen some of your baseball tweets. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are other teams that I love, but the Braves are my first childhood love. I was 6 years old when Hank Aaron broke Babe Ruth's home run record while
Wow.
being assaulted with hate mail and death threats every day.
Yeah.
And that made a big impression on me.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so, I won't go farther into it because I could wax poetic for an hour and a half about the Braves. But I will say that the community that Twitter has made it possible for me to find of folks, mostly in the South, but also like me, spread
Uh-huh.
around the rest of the world. I mean, there's some folks in London, some folks in there's a woman who's in Aruba.
Uh-huh.
It's a great thing. Suddenly, I've found this community that I wasn't in touch with before, who we all have this one love in
Uh-huh.
common, and
Uh-huh.
we have sort of subdivided into Trumpy Braves Twitter and non-Trumpy Braves
Oh,
Twitter,
that's
and
funny.
the two of those don't necessarily interact as much. I think most of the Trumpy ones have unfollowed me at this point, and that's probably for the best. I don't
That's
blame them.
funny. Yeah. No, I have a deep affection for the game too. So
Do you?
yeah,
Well, so you're probably a Red Sox fan.
I grew up in Western Connecticut, so I'm a filthy Yankees fan.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, that was the
Interesting.
in growing up and arriving to baseball in the early '90s, watching it on TV.
Mm-hmm.
My
Mm-hmm.
choices were the Mets or the Yankees, and the Mets were miserable to
Sure.
watch in those years. So
Sure. Yeah.
and
So I will never forget Jim Leyritz in
yes,
Game 5 of the '96 World Series for
yeah,
hitting that Mark Wohlers hanging slider out for a 3-run home run and
beautiful
completing the
opposite field
6-run
shot.
comeback. I will never
Yeah.
forgive him as long as I live. But and I honestly, I feel bad for Yankees fans because I feel like if you don't win the World Series, it's a failure, right?
Yeah.
And so all the Yankees fans I know, they're miserable during the baseball season because of the possibility that they might not win the World Series. And I just feel
Yeah.
like, gosh, that's a terrible way to go through life.
Yeah, it's actually a lot better to be like a Red Sox fan. I feel like they're much
Yeah,
more comfortable.
yeah.
Like they wear their wins and their losses more comfortably. Yankees fans, it's
Well,
all
that, I mean,
even if you win, you feel a little ashamed. I think.
yeah, you live with 108 years of not winning. It takes something out of you.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what life's about, as Bruno Kirby said in Spinal Tap, when you've lived and lost like Frank has.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
uh,
yeah, man.
yeah,
I
it's funny. I did a tweet a few months ago where I said, before the baseball season got going, I said, I know that I tweet about a lot of disparate things. Like I
mhm,
talk about games, I talk about TV and movies, and
mhm.
Marvel Cinematic Universe, I'm a huge fan of. And I talk about politics a lot, and I talk about baseball and the Seahawks and other stuff, other sports. I said, do you guys, should I disambiguate? Should I create other Twitter accounts, or so that you don't have to listen? You don't have to see the tweets. You know that you like
Yeah,
if you're here
yeah.
because I'm a Braves fan, you don't have to look at the political stuff or
What'd you
something.
get back?
And in the poll, literally 84% said no. We like you. We want to hear it all.
That's awesome.
And I have a number of people who have said to me on Twitter, yeah, I don't know anything about baseball, the Braves, but I really love your tweets about them because
I
you're
like
so
when you talk
passionate
about it.
about it.
That's
Yeah,
very comforting for me to hear too. I have my own concerns because like even me like as a creator covering video games and talking to gamers and developers, like I talk to people from different games. And I'm like,
right,
is it
sure.
okay for me to do? Should I just be doing one game all the time? And frankly, I'm a human being. I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
We have
yeah. I mean, I can understand.
multiple interests. We're talking about
That's
baseball.
right. That's right. I completely agree. I think it can be nice for the viewer, but it's not necessarily fun for the person doing it. Right?
Right.
You have a whole self that you'd like to give full expression to. It's
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. And I've that myself I think it's been becoming wholer in the last few weeks. I actually just have stumbled back into baseball after taking basically like a 20-year break from it because I moved from Connecticut down to South Carolina when I was in the late
Hmm.
'90s. At that time, there's no way to watch. There's no way for me to watch games anymore, and so I just
Right. Right.
lost touch with the sport. I got into gaming, and it's like, okay, this hobby's cool. I'm happy to nerd out about this too. And then all of a sudden, I started stumbling into YouTube videos. I think it was like an A-Rod video, and I've been catching up on baseball history over the last 20 years. You know, one of the only ways it's really jumped out at me is for a little while, I was commuting into Seattle down Edgar Martinez Boulevard, and
Yeah.
boy, that chapped my ass. because
Why?
I'll
You
never
guys
forget.
killed the 2001 Mariners, man. They won
But
116 games, and
that
you
was
guys cut them off at the knees in the
yeah.
ALCS.
But that was after I stopped watching, so that's not part of my
Oh
universe.
my goodness!
I'm thinking
Oh
of
my goodness!
'95. I think it's '95. Is it '95? The
Yeah, yeah,
ALDS.
probably.
Edgar just
Yes,
murdered
yes,
us. Edgar just murdered the
yep.
Yanks, and it was
Yeah.
brutal.
And Griffey was pretty new at that point too, and
Yeah,
yeah,
it was
yeah,
Griffey. I think it might have been A-Rod's like first or second year.
yeah. That sounds right.
A big unit was still with the team. Man,
Yeah,
that was the
pre
game.
Ichiro, but
Yeah, that was a game where Randy Johnson came out of the bullpen on like 36 hours rest or something at the end. Just plow through.
I
Oh my
remember that.
god.
Oh
Anyway,
man,
I heard that Edgar got into the Hall of Fame. Good for him.
he did.
He
It's good
definitely earned
news.
it.
Yep. A lot of happy Seattleites for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hey Tom. It's been about an hour and a half. My bladder is calling. Can we take a couple minute break?
Okay. Sure.
You want to
Yeah.
come back, or how you feeling?
Oh, absolutely. No,
All
I'm
right,
good.
all
I'm
right,
good.
man.
I'll go refresh my drink, and we'll get back to it.
So I'll go top off. Be right back, folks.
All right.
And we're back. I'm speaking with
Yeah.
Tom Abernathy, the Mr. Narrative Studio Narrative Director at ArenaNet, formerly whacking eloquently on baseball. You mentioned you wanted to say something about some of the folks on the creative side working on Ender
Yeah, yeah. So
Dragons.
I just wanted we have an amazing group of writers and some collaborators and other ones that I didn't get a chance to specifically call out by name, and I just want to mention their names so if people want to follow them on Twitter or something that they can do that. Our narrative lead is Quan Perng, who is doing a tremendous job. His partner from the content design side is Connor Fallon. And I can't speak highly enough about the work that the two of them have done in leading the team. And you guys are, I think once it comes out, you're going to have good things to say to them as well. We've had marvelous writing contributions as well from Erin. I won't say her last name. She's not on Twitter. I don't know if she wants her last name out there, but from Erin, from Morgan Lockhart, Alex Kane, I want to from Daniel Barnes from Indigo Book Bach. I'm saying it wrong. It's Lindy now anyway. She married Aaron. I'm trying to think. Am I missing anybody who actually has written on this? But I think that's everyone. If I've left your name out, I apologize. But the team it's a fairly lean team, but they've done amazing work, and all the content designers, their partners on that side are tremendous and doing amazing things. And the cinematics team, as always, is holy cow, holy cow.
Yeah.
I just our cinematics director and Chelsea and Jason Annenberg and I a few years ago sort of all got together and kind of resolved to change our focus on in terms of the moments that we pick to make into cinematics. We have to be very selective because we don't have a ton of resources to spend on that stuff. And prior to that, most of our cinematics, like those in a lot of games, had been chosen because it was a moment that was going to be a lot of big spectacle,
Right.
and sometimes you choose them because the designers are wary of whether they can really make it pay off in game.
Right.
They do it in the game engine. And we just decided we felt like that wasn't the right set of criteria.
Okay.
And so we kind of had we kind of honed our philosophy and said, we're going to pick our spots to be the moments that are about personal relationship stuff, characters and important emotional moments for them because it's a thing that leverages what our animators are really good at, which is physicalizing, in various ways, physical performance, facial performance, emotion into movement and physicality, which we also do with the voice actors in terms of the acting, the voice acting. But also because our game, I think at least now, I don't know if it was always this, but certainly at this point, I feel like our IP is really about people, really about characters. It's about their relationships to each other, and I can talk more if you want about sort of what has emerged as the kind of fine story. The point is just, I think back to a moment like Joko's monologue to the commander and Braham as they're frozen. Joko basically tells us what kind of a complete amoral jerk we've been for the
Oh
last
God,
3
that
seasons, right?
monologue is so
Oh man,
amazing.
Nolan North performing as Joko is a thing of wonder to behold. Studio, let me
Yeah,
tell you.
yeah,
And that's one great example. The scene where right after Blish sacrifices himself and Gorik is overcome and leaves, and Taimi
yeah.
and Bram are sort of coping with the fact that Blish has died, and then also Taimi to share with Bram that her disease is no longer in remission.
Right.
And that's a very intimate, I mean, close-ups on an Asura face, a tricky thing to pull off. They've
Yeah.
got all sorts of teeth and stuff, even the cute ones, and
They'll get you those teeth.
but they will. But that was the thing that made sense to spend our limited cinematic resources on, not huge spectacle stuff. The human moments, for lack of a better term, I guess. In Guild Wars, we would say you know in real
Yeah,
world sense, the human size moment.
I love that. Um, Another moment that jumps out at me, and I'm not sure if this is one of those you picked in that with the same criteria in mind, is season 4 when the "I am not him" cutscene with Caithe and Oreen. That's one
Yes,
of my favorites.
that's a great one to pick out because of the fact that, unlike some of them, it has almost no dialogue, right?
Right.
So it is, you're actually, yeah, you're making the point I had in my mind even better, because that is a scene where everything that is communicated is through the physicality
Yeah.
and the facial performances and the animation, and while the one line of dialogue by Caithe and Aureen, by Kari Walgren and Nika Futterman, is certainly contributes to it. Even, I think, even if you had the sound off and you didn't even hear it because their
Yeah.
mouths don't move, or at least Aureen's doesn't. I'm
Right.
not sure about Caithe.
I think
But
his does.
regardless, like
Yeah.
the emotion of that moment is in the physicality of it. It's in the way that it's visualized, and that's, our cinematics folks are so brilliant
Yeah.
at doing that. And that is, I'm thinking that's the sort of thing more I was thinking of, because I'm thinking about moments in End of Dragons that I can't be
That you
specific
can't
about, but
talk about. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, but that bring that same level of skill and
Right.
care to physical performance of non-human creatures sometimes, right? Like that's a
Mhm.
challenge that our folks have. It's not easy to make an elder dragon express emotion on a face, on a head that's 30 feet long. I mean, it's kind of
Yeah.
crazy when you
Yeah, it
think
sounds
about it.
hard.
It's a real challenge. Yeah. And I'm just always amazed. We have a tremendously talented team. Chelsea's team is so good, and our artists and animators on straight up art and animation side are amazing. And yeah, the degree of love they put into what they do is tremendous, and it will be on the screen in End of Dragons. I can say
There it is, folks. Hand of Dragons. Okay.
that.
Ah, man. Okay. So I was excited, but this is actually part of like what I'm. This could be a whole aside, but I'll try to keep this very brief. Um,
Okay.
I, you know, um, I started playing online games in 1999 on my PC, my family PC. My parents
Hmm.
bought me Quake 3, Unreal Tournament, and Half Life for Christmas.
Good parents. Good choices.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they feel good or bad about it at this point, but I feel pretty good about it. So anyway, and that like set me off on a path, and I played World of Warcraft. Like I did all the online gamer things. I played Guild Wars 1. Um, when I came, and then, I grew up. I grew up too. I got into the workforce. I found someone to love me and to love back, and I got to a point with gaming where I wasn't getting something about it wasn't giving me back what I needed to get out of it. I wasn't sure
Hmm.
why, and I started having conversations with people and using that as a starting point to try to figure it out. And I think I'm connecting to something that you were saying before the break, and a little bit there, and a little bit just what you just said, and what this was like for me, where something about it, um, the game as a way to connect with people,
Hmm.
and how I'm finally starting to figure out that that's what it is for me. And that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now every time I get to go into Guild Wars, I get to think about the stuff I talk with you about. I get to think about all the people you called out, all the things that they've done. I get to think about the conversation I had with Bobby. I get to think about all the things I've talked to other Guild Wars streamers about, and all the the loves, the highs and lows of you know being a hardcore gamer. And I get to look at the world and see the people who make the world what it is, both by playing in it and by making it directly. Um, I think it's a beautiful thing, and it's one of the things I love most about games. And I imagine this is something you thought a lot about too, as someone who has a lot of um, uh, film experience and screenwriting experience. Is like
Mm.
the uniqueness of games as narrative engines because it's inherently collaborative with the person who's playing it, but it's asynchronously collaborative, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's
and
true.
I don't know what kind of point I want to make here, but I'm making all these connections that um, I'm just finding a lot of resonance with in terms
Mm.
of the connection, the human element, um, and not human as in strictly Homo sapien. I mean the people element.
Sure. Sure.
I love that. Um, it makes me more excited to understand that focus on uh, the cinematics to be more about those moments, the people moments, as opposed to
Hmm.
a city exploding or whatever the thing
Hmm.
can be. Um,
Hmm.
that's exciting to me, and
Yeah.
that validates that thing I'm starting to figure out. And it also makes me think of um, some talks I've heard you give talking about a point I've heard you make at our GDC talks. I don't remember which one this was about how gamers don't remember plot, but they remember characters.
Yeah.
Um, I wonder why that is. Can you explain that one to me?
Sure. Oh yeah, I absolutely can.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is from a talk that, and I will happily fight anyone who wants to about this. This is from a
All
talk that
right.
Richard Rouse and I did at the Game Narrative Summit at GDC. Oh God, probably. Well, I was at Riot, so that means it has to have been years ago, which is amazing. Um,
Okay.
which was called "Death to Three Act Structure."
Uh-huh.
And it was a fascinating talk because the point we started out is situations where the point we started out making ended up not being quite the place we ended at. Like we came into it thinking we have one conclusion that we're going to draw, and then the deeper we got into the subject, the more we realized, oh wait, we're not actually completely right. we went to that. And it had a number of different aspects. One, as the title sort of suggests, is that it was primarily focused around the talk was primarily focused around the idea of story structure
Okay.
and of what, if any, story structure is best suited for a video game purpose.
Mhm.
And the title "Death to Three Act Structure" refers specifically to Hollywood three act structure, which is a very specific model that's been used, a template that's been used in commercial Hollywood making for decades,
Mhm.
where basically the story is broken into three acts. The first and third are roughly half the size of the second. Each of those is broken down into sequences. The first and third acts into two sequences, and the second act into four. And there are different things that sort of supposed to happen at certain points to nudge the story in certain directions.
Uh,
And if you want to know more about that, talk because we do a quick sort of breakdown of
yeah.
what that is before we then go on to destroy the idea that it has any. games at all, because at the time, we were. I know I was dealing with a lot of producers who would walk in on Monday morning and go, "Oh my God, I spent the weekend reading this book, Save the Cat. Stop everything. This is going to help us make stories better from now on." And there are way too many books like that. Not that they don't sometimes offer some stuff that can be useful, to learn, but for a mind that is not sufficiently already educated about the topic, like they can seem like surefire formulas for success, and they are not. Another example of this is Hero's Journey, based on Joseph Campbell's work, we hear a lot of people, not game narrative people mostly, come into a talk about story, and the first thing they will say is, "Okay, let's talk about Hero." And it's not that Hero's Journey is not a good way to structure a story. Star Wars famously, made a lot of good use of it.
Right.
But as Joseph Campbell himself would have said, he didn't like write it down in a prescriptive sense.
Yeah.
He wasn't saying this is the way all structured. He was
the
saying,
monomyth, right?
Here are some, yes, exactly. Here's some commonality about the ways cultures all over the world, independently of each other, sometimes have sort of generally structured their story.
Yeah.
Interesting to look at the common elements, right, and to see the things that seem to have resonance no matter what culture you come.
Yeah.
And so it was more of a diagnostic, and people just, again, if you're not sufficiently informed on the subject, you can make the mistake of assuming, particularly if you're someone whose livelihood depends on predicting actions will sell. It's very appealing to go, "Oh, here's a thing that is a surefire way of structuring a story that
and
will
if it
make
doesn't
everything
work,
like Star Wars and everybody."
it's the guy whose idea it was fault, not your fault, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the thrust of the talk, the main thrust of the talk. However, at one point in the talk, we did make use, in terms of takeaway, we're getting to the takeaway portion. We made use of some user research data that I had been fortunate enough to have eyes on Microsoft, done by some really great researchers there, who had wanted to they had come up with some metrics for kind of measuring how effective certain design choices were.
Okay.
And they were really happy about that. And at Microsoft Studios, we were using the ways of sort of different games, and they wanted to do the same thing for narrative, but they recognized that narrative is a lot more difficult to quantify and to sort of parse out the influence of. I think it's as anybody who's ever heard me of a minutes knows, I think there's a great deal of understanding about what the narrative, proper understanding of what the role of narrative gives it.
I'm not sure if it's your AirPods or if you can give it a
Oh, it
check.
probably is.
Okay.
Well, no, they're not my microphones over
here.
Oh,
okay. All
right. I am very much of the. I think a lot of people make the mistake of assuming that narrative in games is about words or text.
Right.
And nothing could be further from the truth. I can point to a game like Journey and say, look, there's a game that has no word text in it at all.
Yeah.
And yet, do you feel it has a narrative context? Is there a story being told there? Absolutely, there is.
Yeah.
And protagonist and you having an experience, right? Game narrative is about two things, and two things only. It is about context and meaning. The game narrative is probably properly understood as the way a game experience is contextualized fictionally to make it meaningful, to answer the question, why am I doing this? What's the point? Why does it matter? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Designers are the what and the how people, to some extent. We are the why people.
Okay.
Because if there's no good reason for me to do this other than, oh, it's fun, and I mean, that's enough for some things, but it's not necessarily going to be satisfying on a deep particularly if you're someone with stories and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. And the example that I always like to use, and I apologize if anyone has heard me like they're getting old, like it's getting old, but is that as a game designer, I can give you a gray box experience where you're in a space and you've got this orb and you can bounce the floor and you can throw it to another player and there's a circle elevated on the wall that you want the orb through, and that's fun. There's some gameplay there, and I'll do that for 15 or 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
If, on the other hand, I give you an experience in which I say to you, okay, you're Steph Curry, and it's Game 7 of the NBA Finals,
Mm-hmm.
and you're at home, and the Warriors are down by 1 with 0.4 seconds on the clock, and you're at the free throw.
Uh-huh.
And there are 17,000 fans waving yellow towels in their ear. And whether you hit the next 2 baskets is going to determine whether you win the championship or you go to overtime or you lose the championship, right? Suddenly, this activity has meaning.
Mm-hmm.
It has an emotional value to me that I care about, which allows me to bond with the experience, hopefully to fall in love with the experience so that I become passionate about it and I want to do it over and over again. And I want friends, right?
Yeah.
This is what we do. And so said all that, so I could say the user research data that the UR folks came up with, they had to figure out a way to ask the questions so that they could get useful information. And so one of the questions they came up with was, tell us the story of your favorite movie or of a movie you like a lot.
Sure.
Something you like a lot. Tell us the story of a book you like.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us the story of a video game.
Ah.
And what they found was, interestingly, that that generally people spent about twice as many words describing the story of a book that they liked than they did describing the story of a game that they liked.
Uh-huh.
And beyond that, when they dived deeper into not just the number of words, but what it was they were actually saying, what became clear was that whereas people remembered the plot lines of movies and books very well,
Mm-hmm.
that when it came to summarizing, to telling the story of a game they liked, that the story they told wasn't always necessarily exactly plot, the extent that the game had a plot. Instead, it was a description of their own experience moving through the game, right? So that may involve a cinematic or a player saying something or Cortana saying something in your ear and you respond. But it also may, when you had this boss fight where it took you 25 times to figure out how to do it, or where you first got this weapon that was the thing that made a big difference in a battle you were going to fight. You know what I mean? Like, it was a subjective experience that each player had uniquely.
Right.
And so that it became clear, the researchers felt, and I think they were correct, it became clear that the proper way to sort of think of all that was that the story of the game is the user's experience, is the player's experience moving through it. The plot, they found, simply is not sticky. They can't tell you as much about the plot because they're spending too much energy doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it makes sense. It's very intuitive, right? Which is, as you said, this is one thing that made me really happy because my instinct had been to assume that would be the case. But I didn't have any substantive, evidence to back me up. And now they'd come up with evidence that backed me up. Of course, in a video game, I'm doing stuff. So I'm not just sitting back and passively receiving everything and thinking about it,
No.
That, right?
Oh,
I am taking action and I'm participating in the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they're not going to remember your super clever twist necessarily, or like. And so the conclusion they had drawn, which again I agreed with. It fit my instincts and my experience as well. Was that if a team, had limited resources to spend on the narrative aspect of the game, that those resources would be more effectively spent on NPCs.
Mhm.
And the reason was that the thing that they did remember and talk about was characters,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now, of
Yeah.
course, as soon as I heard this, again, I went, yeah, I knew that. Thank
Duh.
you for giving me that in hard numbers, right? Because, for example, when I played Half-Life 2, I would have jumped off a cliff for Alex Vance. I was
Hell
in love
yeah.
with that woman.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
still in love with that woman. I've never given it up.
Mhm.
And she was as real to me in the moment, the way she needed to be. And I had a great desire to help her be who she wanted me to be. And
Mhm.
I could name you 4 other games off the top of my head where I have experiences with with NPCs, and that was the thing players could talk at length about.
Mhm.
So they
Mhm.
said, "Don't worry about the plot so much." And let me tell you, I mean, because we were at the time, I was working on a project. I was advising several of us from the Microsoft Narrative Design Group, advising on a project with one of our first party studios
Okay.
that was very plot heavy,
Okay.
very plot. I mean, because the guy who ran the studio and the lead designer there, like that's what they wanted. It was with getting too specific because it never got made. It was in the vein of a kind of like a Mission Impossible or Jason
Like a thriller.
spy, big spy action thing. Yeah,
Okay.
and and boy did they we had meetings for weeks about the plot of this thing.
Mm.
And the whole time, I'm thinking to myself, this is wasted energy because Deborah Henderson has already told me none of this is going to stick with people.
Uh-huh.
We should be talking about who the characters are. And so the line that I said in the GDC talk, which immediately was taken out of context and vilified by smart alecky people on Twitter,
Uh-huh.
was Abernathy says plot is overrated. And suddenly I had all these people who never worked professionally in any kind of storytelling getting on Twitter. Oh my God, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Plot is overrated. you know, and I was like, okay, yeah, screw me. What do I know? Not just the decades of experience I have doing stuff like this, but also what the best, researchers in the business have just told me is what
Uh-huh.
they've found, empirical science, whatever. Okay, you guys do what you want best. And
Sometimes you gotta let him.
um,
Yeah.
I totally. I hope that they eventually came around. I don't know, but but yeah, it was a really great thing to hear because what it I mean, to be fair, it was a really great thing for me to hear because that's my strength.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
not the strongest plot guy in the world, and I know that. And so, if you were to say to me, "I have empirical evidence that plot is the only thing gamers care about," I would be like, "I wonder if I should think about getting into a different line of work because that is not
Right.
my forte."
Well,
But
yeah.
I
This
started out as
reinforces
an
your own story of kind
well,
of finding
exactly.
video game narrative.
I started out as a professional actor on stage at 11. I did my first movie when I was 13. My
Uh-huh.
whole life has been about people relating to each other in a dramatic context,
Uh-huh.
and so that is right in my wheel in terms of what I'm good at and what I understand and what I can help other people understand better. And so it was nice. It was a really validating. And it was mostly funny to me that some people were so threatened by by that conclusion, which wasn't even the talk. But oh my God, the headlines that happened within 15 minutes.
It's the price you
Oh, it
pay
was
for saying
something
what you think
crazy.
on the internet.
Hmm. Not even on the internet. It was on GDC.
Oh, right, right,
Like
yeah.
people are tweeting from the audience and stuff.
Oh man,
Crazy.
I get that
It's
clout.
one of the only times I've been controversial.
Enjoy it while it lasts, I guess. Yeah.
Right, right. The notoriety.
Okay, so characters are the thing, and
Yeah.
this lines up for you. This is a strength you have. This happened while you were working with over at Microsoft Studios, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then I think I have a timeline right. Tell me if this is right. After there, your next port of your next port was over with Riot
Sort of
Games.
part of called. Yeah, that's right.
and you
Yes. So when I was at
and that's a
Microsoft, I
game.
worked on a.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, sure. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I was anticipating where you were going, but finish your question. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, I was just gonna make the connection between man makes characters, man works on game that's all about characters. Like,
Wouldn't you think?
yeah,
Wouldn't you think?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know how much of this story I've ever told publicly, and I'll keep the names out of it
Okay.
because really none of the principal people involved are even there anymore as much. So yeah. Let me say this. So I have a lot of affection for Riot. I have a lot of affection for League of Legends.
Mm-hmm.
And I really was looking forward to it for the reason you say, because if ever there was an IP that's all about the characters, it's that. And
Yeah.
one thing I was astonished by as soon as I got there was to see how much they had the champion creation process down to a science. I
Uh-huh.
mean, it didn't always work. Like sometimes you spent 6 months developing something that ended up not happening. But
That's part of the high quality bar.
when it well, exactly. And when they did get all the way through, they were each distinct and fascinating and memorable in a
Mm-hmm.
jillion different ways. And those teams are cross-disciplinary. And that was some of the most fun such work that I've ever been a part of. I had a great time. There are a lot of I sounded like I was burning the league community earlier. I'm not. Players, as you say, it's a very competitive game. I'm not a very
Yeah.
competitive person, so in that sense, I wasn't necessarily the best fit. I mean, look,
Okay.
here's the reality, without getting too deep into the specifics
Okay.
or throwing anybody under the bus. That was a moment 7 years ago, 8 years ago now, where where Riot was doing, what ArenaNet did just a couple years before I arrived, which was
Mm-hmm.
first starting to go, oh, narrative is a thing that our players care about, and it's a way we might be able to make our game better if we
Mm-hmm.
had people who maybe know something about it in the building. So let's start building a narrative team. And again, like most studios did, the first thing they did is they went, do we have anybody already?
Right.
Hey, you in QA, I saw you've posted some fanfic. Can you write? You want to come do this? Okay, you in community, an English major, right? Even though you're 22 and just graduated from college, why don't you come over and join the. And don't get me wrong, fabulous people, every single one of these folks. Okay, I'm not like amazingly talented, but young and green, and no one prepared them. They weren't ready for what they were being asked to do.
Uh-huh.
They didn't have the skills yet, and there was nobody to show them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so then Riot smartly went, okay, let's hire somebody who's good at this to show them. And they did. I won't say who it was. It was somebody who was a big league fan and player, but who had achieved a great deal of success in a different medium,
Okay.
who they brought over with the mission of improving this aspect of what they did. And also,
Mm-hmm.
look,
Mm-hmm.
Riot already at that point was the most popular game in the world. I remember hearing the statistic, which sounded impossible, which was at any given moment, 3% of all internet traffic in the world is League of Legends games. I doubt that's still true, but it was apparently true at the time, and it's just mind blowing, right?
Yeah, it's huge.
And so, and it's in LA, it's in Santa Monica, and so there were Hollywood people circling the place constantly,
Mm.
wanting to, honestly wanting to. They were sharks who wanted to get fat off of the gold mine that they.
Mm.
Sorry to mix my metaphors, but that they saw Riot and League of Legends. There were a lot of hangers on sort of functions.
Mm.
Sometimes there were, there were people who wanted to be involved with the idea of taking this IP and making movies and making stuff
Sure.
with it,
The
And
multimedia stuff.
again,
Yeah.
8 years ago, it wasn't like now, where now we have examples of
Mm-hmm.
where that's happened and it's been really successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the time, it mostly had not happened. It had happened not to any great creative success, and usually not to any economic success either. No, but people hadn't mostly figured out how to take a game IP and make a decent movie or TV show out of it at the
Mm-hmm.
time. I think Resident Evil is maybe one of the only things I can think of that sort of made that
Arguable.
jump. Yeah, exactly. In many senses, right?
Mm.
And so this guy that they hired hired a couple other guys sort of like me who were older, experienced people from games, brought them in, and then was looking for someone to be. He was the creative director, and he was looking for somebody to be the narrative lead, which is the first time they would have had one of those, the highest narrative position at the company at the time.
Okay.
And he and a woman who's one of the most important lead designers they had, the two of them were the ones that hired me.
Okay.
Like a lot of people, I had talked to Riot several times over several years. That's just how they roll, but this time, I mean, these people really saw that, and they wanted that. They were, he especially was from creative entertainment, from creative dramatic entertainment, and so he knew the values, he had them.
Sure.
That's why he wanted me there.
Yep.
And so I came in, and the morning that I came in, the director of another creative discipline, and I won't be any more specific than that, basically in what I can only describe as an empire building power grab. I arrived that morning, having driven down from Seattle 2 days earlier and gotten my apartment all set up. I arrived that morning for my first day at work, discovering that this person had basically effected a coup and had taken over the narrative department. He was not a narrative director; he was from a different discipline, and had gotten the guy who had hired me, who was putatively the creative director, put in a corner on a side project. Basically, he just took over the team from me.
Huh.
And that was my first meeting, was that guy sitting down with me and telling me that he was now my new boss. And that, gosh, he looked forward to working with me.
Okay.
Uh,
Sounds awkward.
Oh, well, I mean, what it was ultimately, spent the next year trying with some great collaborators. I loved that team. Again, even the young folks who were green, boy, did they want to learn, and they were so they are. Some of them have many of them have gone on to amazing success. You mostly not at Riot, but still they're tremendous. It was great working with them. And some of the senior guys are some of the best friendships that I've made in the business, and I still keep in touch with them, and they're brothers of mine. But we went through hell. We went through a war, and mainly it was because we no longer had. It's so important doing what I do to have the support of the person above you, of leadership for them, as I described Mo earlier, has having done, right? I mean, particularly once I'd been there a couple of months and he'd really seen me in action, he decided that he trusted that I knew what I was doing and that I knew some stuff he didn't, and he sort of backed away and let me do it.
Right.
And he was right. I think, I mean, almost objectively, you can look at that we've done and what people, team and with us have to say, and I think it's incontrovertible that was the right thing to do. The guy who could have done that for me at Riot was disempowered and no longer my boss the morning I walked into the studio for the first time. And so the next year was me having to hope and trust that the guy who now was my boss, who was not from my discipline, meant it when he said he was behind what we were trying to do. And I was wrong. It turned out that was not true. And which is a shame, because I learned a great deal from him. He talked a great game. I learned a great deal from him about being a manager of a team. It's just that he didn't practice what he preached when it really came down to it.
Yeah.
And he was going to build his empire if he could, and he would throw people under the bus as needed in order to make that happen. He'd done it with the guy who hired me, and he did it with other people while I was there. And so we all fought that good fight. I fought it for a year, and I was also, there were extenuating circumstances. I was commuting from Seattle, so I'd go down every Monday morning, fly back every Friday evening, and I had a young daughter, and I didn't I knew how hard it was for me. It was, but I didn't have family.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, if I had, I probably would have ended it sooner. But but it was a very difficult year, and the long story short of it is, the answer to your question is, ultimately I was not empowered to do it, to do that, what you talked about. I wanted to. That's what we were there to do. Our team was ready to do it. We were leveling up like crazy. We had some really great folks who knew what they were doing, and we just did not have solid backing from our leadership. And one thing that I learned from that, I mean, first being at Microsoft and then being there, I you'll understand it as a Yankees fan. I think one of the reasons that I took the job with Microsoft in 2008, after having been at Pandemic Studios for 3 years, is because they approached me, and Pandemic had gotten sold, and it was easy to see how, because at that time there was lots of publishers buying studios and then shutting them down. So it was easy to foresee that was in the cards at some point. And Microsoft and a couple of other companies in Seattle reached out to me, and my wife and I had always, Microsoft being interested in me sort of felt like, oh, finally I'm done with my rookie contract. I get my free agent opportunity, right? And I want to see what my worth is, and the Yankees are in. And wow, right? And who wouldn't be overjoyed to do that? Brian McCann, damn you! I'm not bitter. That's a very inside Braves Yankees. Those three of you out there who might understand. And so 5 years there and a year at Riot, what I learned was I don't want to be playing for the Yankees. I'm not cut out for that. I'm not happy dealing with everything that goes with the places that have the most heat and that have the most, that people most see as an opportunity, a place where they themselves can make their fortune. Because, and I'm not talking about so much the people at the companies as the people circling the companies. Sometimes. Right, this was a big perception. Thing.
Right.
Yeah, and like, I am not big Entertainment Co. Inc. material. I am too much of an iconoclast. I'm too much of I have my way of seeing things and doing things, and the way you can get the most value out of it is let me do what I know how to do the way I know.
Yeah.
Instead of telling me, oh, there's the cardinal way, you got to confirm.
Yeah.
Right. You come to the Yankees, got to cut your beard off, got to shave your beard off, because the boss, he doesn't like that. And that's not me.
Got it.
I'm not happy, and I'm not appreciated is the other thing. Like, they want you to conform to a degree. They are not interested in what you individually bring.
Yeah.
At least those experiences. That was my experience at those two places. And what I realized after Riot was that the happiest I'd ever been was the 3 years I was at Pandemic. And the year before it, writing Destroy All Humans as a contractor. And so I realized I am not suited to play the Yankees, to play for the Yankees. I should be playing, for the Braves. I should be playing for the Padres or some, smaller market team that doesn't have all of the weight of that from everybody looking at it. And that was one reason that I was looking at a place like ArenaNet. It took me several years to find an opportunity doing what I wanted to do. And when Mo gave me that opportunity, I was super grateful. When he left, I told him for that it was a gift, unlike anything anybody else has ever done for me in this business, and he put a lot of trust in me, and I never took that for granted, and I hope that I fulfilled it. I think that I did. I do remember the day that all right, so to segue a little bit into a GW2 thing that may bring up memories for you. So Path to Fire had come out.
Yep.
And we were determined at that time to follow it up almost immediately with the first episode of season 4.
Right.
Like, we knew people weren't expecting that.
Yes.
And we wanted to give it to them. And so You know, Path of Fire came out, and almost immediately we were like, and in 3 weeks, here comes out episode 1 of season 4 or whatever, right?
That was crazy.
It was crazy. We had already been hard at work. And speaking only for myself, since I was so new to the company, I mean, I didn't know anything at that point about anything.
Okay.
And boy, was I flying by the seat of my the way we got the first couple of episodes of Living World season 4 out were very different from the way we ended up by the end of this, just by necessity. There was a lot more twine and duct tape and holding things together with glue.
Okay.
But here's the main thing. The main thing was that that I, in terms of, I want to be careful about how I talk about this, because I don't mean to disrespect the work of anybody who came before me, working on narrative stuff or whatever. There's a lot of really good people who did. So when I got there and I sort of re-immersed myself in GW2 and everything, my sense was that there's a lot of really wonderful elements and characters, but that some of the characters had really never been fleshed out. I didn't get any sense of who they were as people. They were archetypes to some degree.
Right.
And there were exceptions to that. But
it was true as an exception at that time.
So this is Ritlock, I think, is an exception to that. Ritlock Brimstone is a character that immediately, I mean, he was already the most popular NPC in the game, but it was easy to see why.
Yep.
And we hadn't even hardly totally gotten into the reasons why, but I could see how, like, what we could do with what had already been done there. And just like his experience being the reason Balthazar was able to escape in Path of Fire, getting Sahath and his sword, his flaming sword, and busting out, and Ritlock, feeling some guilt about that. And I don't remember if that was a thing that already existed in Path of Fire before I got there or not. Regardless, that's what happens in Path of Fire. If you play it now, that happens, and Ritlock spends some time really feeling responsible for having let Balthazar, who is the self-styled god of war, get out and go on the loose and start destroying people and things. So Ritlock is a great example.
Bit of a wild card, that Balthazar.
Indeed. And then there were other characters who, as I was sort of doing my audit kind of how players felt about different aspects of the story thus far and everything, there are other characters who players clearly liked but really weren't happy with at the moment. And in that number, I would count Braham, who the comment that we saw all players on forums and stuff was he's too emo, he's whiny, he can't get over his mother dying, blah blah blah. Caithe a bit, because I think the stuff with stealing the egg and Caithe was a complicated character, but she hadn't figured out why or
her motivations
what it was about
were hard to understand.
Yeah, exactly. It was it needed some work. And then the other thing was Marjory and Kasmeer, who everybody loved as a same-sex couple, but who, frankly, when we started talking about what do we do with Marjory and Kaz, the answer was, I don't know, because I don't really know who they are. And it took us a while to figure out the reason that was true was because everybody, both the players and the devs, had always thought of Marjory and Kasmeer as a couple. They hadn't really spent much time thinking about them as individuals.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we realized was, if we're ever going to figure out Marjory and Kasmeer as characters, we got to take them individually. We got to break them apart as a couple, not necessarily in terms of divorcing them or whatever, but we got to think of them separately as separate people, and then figure out why they work together and what it is that compels them to be with each other, right? And that was a big thing, and people who play Guild Wars will know that was not a ball we picked up and ran with pretty much at all during season 4. And then coming into Icebrood Saga, Marjory and Kasmeer reappear, and it seems like that we're going to do some stuff with them in Icebrood Saga, and then a little, but mostly separate, and they kind of fall off of it because our footprint started getting reduced in terms of what we're going to have the bandwidth to do. And just because of some changes that were made in terms of the size of the episodes and the frequency, we started putting out more frequently, and that meant they needed to be smaller and stuff like that. And it just like the opportunity, we never got we needed a certain amount of runway in order to really deal with Kasmeer and Marjory adequately to begin to move them forward. And so we make reference to it at the beginning of Icebrood Saga, but it doesn't get as developed in Icebrood Saga as we originally intended for it to.
Yeah, you got
That's
Char
okay.
to
We haven't
deal
forgot
with.
about it.
You got other stuff to deal with.
There's a lot of stuff going on. Braham and the spirits of the wild and all that stuff. I mean, all I'll say is we have not forgotten.
Okay.
And believe me, we have not forgotten. So, but
those
are 3 examples of characters
out
who
Marjory and Kaz are as individuals, and then why together, and
why together?
Yeah, it makes
people
sense
love
to me.
them. Why? People loved them because they were, same-sex couple poster children, and that's not a good enough reason. There needs to be a better reason for people to love them. Plus, they had 2 terrific actors playing them.
True.
All these folks did. So that was the thing we wanted to do. Anyway, the point of this is to say that the main thing that I knew I wanted very quickly, early in my time at ArenaNet, was that I felt like the tone to that point, at least pre-Path of Fire, had been more superficial than I thought was best for the story and the characters and for the players really to enjoy it. I think it is fair to say, and I say that because I know people who worked on the original game who will say this now. I think it's fair to say that the first game, I'm sorry, meaning the vanilla Guild Wars 2, not Guild Wars 1, vanilla Guild Wars 2, was very sort of standard Tolkien-inspired Northern European flavor kind of fantasy, right? With a couple of new species thrown in to make things interesting, which is cool. But you had your, handsome white male lead in Logan, and your fiery redhead warrior.
Oh yeah. Good tropes.
Like you can just like I said, archetypes, right?
Your Dark Knight with Ritlock.
Yep, exactly. I haven't ever thought of it in that way, actually. That's great. That's fabulous. Totally true. And I just felt like they haven't been developed in the way that I'd like to see them developed as people, which makes my job harder because it means I don't know what to do with them. If I don't know who they are, if I don't know what they want and what they need and what the difference in those things is, which is the way that I've always approached thinking about characters since I was an actor. I was taught that. If I don't know that about them, if it's not clear, then I can't know what's going to be an interesting thing to do with them. So we've got to figure that out for everybody. And the ones we can't figure it out for, we're going to have to sort of sideline for a while, at least in can. So going along with this notion in my head was the idea that the stakes did not feel sufficiently high to me. Now, that may sound funny, because I don't really mean the stakes. I mean, obviously, like in Path of Fire, Balthazar could destroy the world if he becomes powerful enough, and if not, there's Kralkatorix flying around somewhere, and you got that to contend with.
The world is a place with people in it, right? It's the character stakes.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, right? Yeah. Like it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to feel it. And how do you feel it? How do you make the player feel it? Characters are what matter to them, right? So you need to raise the stakes and make things really matter. The number one complaint people have about video games in terms of characters, it's that dying doesn't mean anything because the player character always revives and important NPCs will always come back one way or another. And death is a thing that happens over and over again, and it has no right.
It's cheap.
Yeah. So Bobby and I talked about it, and we were like, death needs to mean something.
Yeah.
This is actually a big question going at the studio at the time. How do we make death mean something? Because I think they'd gotten a lot of heat for the way they killed Air in some ways, and they were determined not to bring her back, because that would be like, players are already mad that we bring characters back too much, right? So there's no way we're bringing Air back, and then of course we brought her back at one point as a ghost, basically out of the mist.
Yeah.
But
that was a neat little moment.
Generally
though.
but generally we've stuck to that, right? And we only did it because actually it became necessary. We realized for Braham to have an arc, he needed to come to a better place in terms of how he felt about his mother, and the best way for that to happen is for his mother to show back up and say, "Stop obsessing about me all the time."
Yeah.
So that's what we did. But this was the thing, and it was a big thing at the studio when I came. You know, players feel like we're never serious when we kill characters off, so when we do that, we need to really stick to it. Okay, cool. Best way to establish that, I think, is to put people you care about in jeopardy, and I mean real jeopardy, and have it not treated in any kind of superficial, haha, I will save you kind of way, but rather have it treated as a thing that is real and that they could die. How do I sell that? Well, I sell that by having them tell you, I am really afraid because this thing is real to me and I'm afraid I could die. I mean, you know, put most simply. So, okay, Joko.
Yeah.
Joko was not, and I've said this elsewhere, so this is not making news. For the narrative folks, Joko was not the big ticket item for season 4.
Yeah.
We were focused on Kralkatorrik. But then we had to focus on Path of Fire for a while. When we came back, a lot of work had been done, sort of not necessarily as mindful as it might have been about the talk we'd had about what we were going to do story-wise, and suddenly Joko was the big thing at the moment, right? Joko's the big bad. Okay, there's a lot there to work with, fine.
Definitely.
But okay, so if Joko's going to be the big bad for a while, he needs to be legitimately scary. How do we make him legitimately scary? He's going to seriously threaten someone we care about, like the Joker would do, for example. You know, with Batman, especially the Heath Ledger Joker, and that was sort of the way we were trying to think of it.
Okay.
You know, to take someone you care about, to take Rachel, right, in Dark Knight.
Yep.
And tell Batman, you know, you got Rachel here, you got Harvey, what's his name, over here. Two different places, you can't save them both, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how you push the buttons. And so, who's our most vulnerable character? Who's the person who we love the most, who is least able to defend themselves?
It's got to be Timey.
Her name is Timey.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So we're going to start this, and this became a template for how we handled the first several episodes of the season. Actually, they would start out as one thing and then bend in the middle and become something different. It was kind of on purpose, because we wanted to be telling people we're coming at this differently than we used to.
Okay.
And we want you to be prepared for that, right? So if you play season 4, episode 1 right now, the beginning of it feels fairly fun. Like, there's some stuff you need to get, and there's some pirates, and they're kind of piratey, and they're fun, and there's Saeed the Slide. It's neat, and you're like putting stuff together to make the rum punch, and you know, and all this stuff, pirates. And it's yeah, exactly. And then you know, you get knocked. You come up with this crazy plan to spring Zaim, the leader of the Sun Spears, out of jail where he's being held by getting yourself arrested and thrown in jail.
That's right.
So that you can bust him out from the inside, I guess, right?
Flawless. What could go wrong?
Chef's kiss. Brilliant plan. But it's all fun and games, and you get yourself knocked out, and you wake up in the jail, and in the next cell is Zaim, and you're like, "Hey, Zaim, we're here to bust you out. Yay, Commander!"
Go on an adventure. That'll be fun.
That's right. And the two of you are in the process of doing that. You're in the process of doing that. And then you hear your comm, which was confiscated from you in the other room. You hear, "Commander? Commander, are you there? Commander, please, you got to be there. Please, come in. Please, he's going to hurt me. Come in." And you're like, "What the?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
And over the comm, you hear the Joker tell you that he has kidnapped Rachel.
Yeah.
And he's going to kill her. And
Yeah.
there's not a thing you can do about it. Except the Joker's, in this case, his name is Joko, and Rachel's name is Tiny.
If I remembered right, too, isn't Joko like killing and awakening people? Like it's not just kill
That
her,
is exactly
but it's turned her
correct.
into an undead
Yes.
too. It's doubly horrifying.
Yep, for sure. Because, and we talked about, we don't want people to misunderstand this is a fridging situation. We're not going to kill Tiny just to motivate the hero, right? This is not that. This is someone you care who is literally the most person who is in your care, who has been taken by this madman who, yes, is literally raising people from the dead and awakening them and turning them into zombies in front of her and terrifying the shit out of her. And it's not funny. It's scaring her to death, which is the point. He is psychologically torturing poor Tiny, who used to have a bow in her hair. And like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So
the plucky little genius.
Yeah. You played it and you remember. I mean, long story short, look, we save her. It's good. But when we find her, she's in Scruffy, her mech, her golem, and she can't. Joker's made it so she can't open the hatch, and the air is going out, and she can't breathe. So the final battle we have to do before she asphyxiates. Right? This
is some good stakes.
This poor young woman, pretty good. I mean, I'm not saying it's Shakespeare, but it was serviceable for what we wanted to do. And the main thing we wanted to do was say to the players, whatever you're used to, what we're here to tell you is things are going to get realer than they've been. It's still fantasy. It's still Guild Wars. It's not Silence of the Lambs most of the time, but we're going to put people you love in situations that have high urgency and emotional stakes, because we think that's going to make you love this even more.
Right.
So the morning that episode got released, we have a wonderful thing at ArenaNet. I've done it since we've all been home, working from home because of the pandemic. But when we're in the building on the morning of a release, mostly they will bring in coffee carts to have people make fancy coffee drinks. They have a waffle bar where some of the producers will make waffles for everybody. It's a fun, joyous occasion. Everybody's excited. And for something big like Path of Fire, there's even like a button on the wall, and Mo pushed the button, and when we counted down and the thing went live, we don't do that for a Living World release.
That's fun. But I love that.
Yeah, but it's a very festive atmosphere, right?
Right.
So we're all still riding high because Pathfire came out a couple of weeks earlier, 3 weeks earlier, and we're excited because it's doing well. People really like it, and it's doing well, and that was great.
Crystal Desert, man.
But like I said, I came in the middle of that. Everything was to me. So anything that's good about Path of Fire, I mostly say don't thank me, thank somebody else who was brilliant and did it well. Because I was still trying to figure out what was which direction was up. But it was known among the creative folks in the studio, at least, that episode 1 of season 4, which is called Daybreak. That it represented a risk. And I had talked to Mo about this, and I'd gotten his okay. I'd said all the things I just said to you. I'd said to him,
right,
we want to raise the stakes. We want to signal to people that bad things can happen in this world, because that's the only reason. Right? If you know the hero is always going, exactly. If you know the hero is always going to succeed and not be killed, then what's the point of anything?
Why get out of bed? Yeah.
failure has to be a potential thing that can happen, and I mean failure in the sense of absolute death or the world ending or something.
Mm-hmm.
So when that episode went live, it was, you know, at 8:30 that morning or whenever it was. It was we were holding our breath a little.
Yeah.
Because I didn't, you know, we didn't know how people were going to respond. I was hopeful, certainly, that they would like what we'd done. But I knew that it was different from what they were used to. And I knew that there was a possibility that I didn't know the player base well enough yet, that I didn't know the IP well enough yet, that I had come in and made two big changes too early with a playset I was just getting to know, right?
Missed the theremin.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah, so it looks like I did pick up that lesson and carry it forward. And I think so the episode went live and people like, you know, Aurora Peachy started streaming it and everything. And we always have the streamers up on televisions around the studio. We're watching all of them and we want to see how they react to stuff and how players are reacting to stuff. And you know, long about halfway into the time it takes to play the episode, players started freaking out. And thank goodness they were not freaking out because they did not like what they were seeing. They were freaking out, and I'm going to do my best. I'll do my best to paraphrase as closely as I can to actual comments I remember seeing.
Okay.
They were freaking out because, oh my God, Joko has Timey. Oh my God, Joko is awakening dead people in front of Timey. He's torturing her. He's terrorizing her. Oh my God, I have to find Timey right now. How do I find Timey? I don't know how to find Timey. Where is she? Right?
Yeah.
And as soon as we started seeing those comments appearing on the forums and we were hearing streamers say it out loud as it was happening, experiencing it, and it was clearly terrifying people in the best way, in the right way. It was making them care. I don't remember who it was. I wish I did, but I do remember somebody who was not on the narrative team. I was sitting. I had just like plopped down on a table by the stairs at one point in the lunch area, and I was just sort of like letting the fact that people didn't seem to hate it so far kind of, you know, I was
Just
letting that
like
wash
the
over.
relief wash over you. Yes,
exactly.
I know what you're talking about.
But somebody walked past me. I feel like it was a producer, but I don't know. And said, this must feel pretty vindicating, huh? And I was like, you know what? It kind of does. It was one of those moments where you take a big creative risk and you know you're rolling the dice and you could fail huge, right? But another Konstantin Stanislavski quote that I like to quote is, without risk, there can be no discovery.
Yeah.
And I believe that in my bones. This is probably another good reason why I'm not good to work for giant entertainment conglomerate Inc.
Yeah,
because they're not usually into that, right?
Yeah.
But I believe in being willing to fail because it's the only way that you really can succeed, I think. And Bobby and I had taken a big risk. I mean, that's part of why I felt fairly solid, is because Bobby knew all this stuff a lot better than I did. And he was like, yeah, I think this will work. I think it's the right way to go. I think people are really going to love it. Our players are going to like, the whole time he was saying, yes, I think these, you know, these instincts are the right way to go.
And Bobby Stein, who'd been into reading that for however many years at that point, he would be in a position
like 8
to
years
know.
at that point. Yes.
He knows the players. Yeah.
And so I trusted him implicitly, as I still do. And I always would. And so the fact that he believed in it, that meant a lot. And I felt fairly confident going in, but you never know. And there are a few moments in any creative person's life, I think, where in your career where you really have a moment like that. You know, you've taken a giant creative risk and you don't know if the audience is going to come along.
Yeah.
And there's a lot riding on it, because if it had not been popular with the players, I don't know that I would have been working there 48 hours later. But fortunately for me, fortunately for us, players really loved it.
Yeah.
And that was awesome. So then Bobby and I looked at each other and went, okay, this is what we're doing. This works. This is making them happy. And it's also taking us to new places and to a kind of storytelling that this game has not dared to do before, and a depth of character, a depth of stakes, that is going to make it all more meaningful than it's ever even been. And it's going to make them love it that much, and it's going to hurt at times. And that's how you do it.
You gotta be in the shadow to appreciate the light.
Yep, that's exactly right. And fortunately, that's mostly been the case in my time at ArenaNet. Players have, sometimes we threw them curveballs they didn't expect. Sometimes, as with the Marjory and Caithe thing, we obviously sort of planted a thing that didn't necessarily pay off as quickly as we had hoped to, and people are like, what's going on with that? But mostly people don't go, well, screw you, I'm not playing your game anymore. They just go, wonder what's up with that, right?
Right.
And as Julia once said at the event at the Moore Theater, started much Icebrood Saga, she said, we don't do anything by accident. And she's right in terms of narrative. Like if every choice we make is deliberate. It's not always a thing we have complete control over. But we're aware of it. So if there's character, like for example,
okay,
I don't want to get into it, but I'll just say the word Zojja. Okay.
Yeah.
We know.
Yeah. Okay.
We know.
You hear that, Guild Wars 2 community? Tom knows. ArenaNet knows.
We know. We
All
know.
right.
Believe me, there's not a thought you can express about that situation that we ourselves have not said to each other many, many times. Okay.
All right.
It's a tough situation for lots of reasons, and we haven't figured out how to solve it yet. And when we do, Zojja.
Yeah.
And until then, it won't be good enough for you. And so we're not going to do it. That's the reality. Until fairly recently, we weren't ready to do good stuff with Marjory and Kaz. And so we didn't, because we didn't want to half-ass it, because they deserve better, and players who love them. We had space and time to deal with Braham, first and foremost. If there's one character, aside from Maureen, who has evolved the most over the last 2 seasons of Living World content, obviously it is Braham, and that was very intentional. He was the biggest problem child. He was the one people were like, I hate this character. Why is he even here? He's boring. He's emo. And we were just like, we can't let that be the last word in that, right?
Right.
So we spent, I'm sorry, I don't even know how many episodes, 6 episodes in season 4, and depending how you count all the stuff in season 5 in the Icebrood Saga, we spent a bunch of episodes, bringing Braham's arc to a place where he is now a fully realized, and he didn't even die like he thought he was going to, and we have to figure out what that means.
Right.
That is
right.
I love that, because I sort of, like, from the beginning, I was like, the great thing about this situation is it's that thing where you're sure you're going to die, and so you accept that, right? And you're like, I'm going to go on the kamikaze suicide mission. I'm going to do the thing. I'm going to help save the world. I will die in the process, but I'll be building my legend. It's worth it. This is
very
a worthy
Norn.
way for me to go. Absolutely, very Norn, exactly.
Yeah.
And it seemed like that was the best way. Finally, Braham could be the Norn that he always wanted. Wasn't sure how, right? And then you do that, and you don't die, even though 2 different prophecies seem to make it a lead pipe cinch that you had to.
Yeah.
Like, how exhilarating does that have to feel once you get sort of the whole lava wolf stuff out of your system? I mean, the possibilities for that are really huge, and I love them. And so that's really exciting. But that's, long story short with Braham is we have brought him to a place where now, like anything is possible. He has nothing but blue sky in front of him, and we get to see what that means.
Yeah,
right?
he's passed through his night. He's passed through the night.
Yes.
And it's the dawn for
him. He
him.
has. That's a good way of putting it. We are sort of mid-process that with Caithe. But certainly the evolution of what's happened with Aurene has, I think, focused Caithe and given her a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
That she didn't necessarily have before. It was wonderful, sort of letting her and the commander play out this mom and dad thing with Aurene in season 4. And it was a funny thing though, because, and I've told this story before, so this isn't news either, but it's a good story. The cinematic that you made reference to earlier, where Aurene basically asks Caithe to let her brand her.
Yeah.
And Caithe consents to that and is transformed in the way she is, and now fully can, psychologically, telepathically communicate with Aurene and be her voice because she can't speak.
Mm-hmm.
And we loved that moment. We loved the idea. We were like, Caithe is going to be the...
Yeah.
And then the very next episode, Aurene comes back to life and goes, "We got to go get Kralkatorrik. Jump, get on our back, and you're off like a shot to follow Kralkatorrik into the mist. Right. And you can't take Caithe with you.
It's only a one-seater."
Right? And so, literally, for that reason, we went, "Oh, God. That whole voice of Aurene, it's got to go. It's just got to go. Like, she can talk now when she comes to life again because she's got to be able to talk, or how else will you communicate with her when you're, which
Joko's
is really
magic
funny.
But Joko's gift was the gift of gab, so why? Yeah, like it makes sense to me.
The sense of humor hasn't quite manifested yet. I'd like to see it, and then I'm sure Nika would love to see it.
I want to hear Aurene tell a joke. That'd be a good moment.
I do. I mean, she does though. She gets in a couple of witticisms, right, during Icebrood Saga, and a couple times people even sort of call it out. Oh, look how funny, she's being. So yeah, I mean that's been part of Aurene maturing too. But I love that fact simply because I love making it public because it's good for people to understand that we're not magicians with the world at our fingertips. That we're doing all of this under very real constraints of time and money and person power, bandwidth, and what's possible technologically. And sometimes you have this grand plan, and then this awesome gameplay mechanic means you have to dispense with it almost immediately for the better experience that the player is going to have playing the game. And that's okay. But sometimes that's the way it rolls. Right. And that's as good a nutshell describing what it's like doing narrative in video games as any I think I could come up.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. A great idea overpowered by an even better idea. And how do you reconcile the two? And I gotta say, the good
thing was,
go ahead.
No, I was just saying the good thing was that at least it gave us a direction to go with Caithe that we have continued. So that was that part worked.
Yeah.
Great, yeah.
Planting a seed for her personality to bloom in the future. I was just gonna say though that like I actually took the time to go back and revisit all the dragon stories a few weeks back after playing through the last story release with Primordius and Jormag, and had taken the time to experience the last part of the season 4 arc with Aurene and that whole story and the competition with Kralkatorrik, being able to do it like sitting there in a session. I was so overpowered by how powerful that arc was, and how I was just so impressed at not just the spectacle of the confrontation with the Elder Dragon,
which is pretty incredible. Yeah,
it's incredible, and it's part of the reason it's so incredible because I don't make games about Elder Dragons, but I think that probably making an Elder Dragon confrontation pay off is probably a very hard thing to do. It seems very hard to me.
Correct.
And
yeah,
I loved how in episode 5, after, with all this trepidation, right? You have Oreen's vision of the future where she doesn't make it through, and
Mhm.
you trying to get to a point with her where there's a trust, and then you decide you're going to go to you're going to face him, face down Kralkatork in the Thunderhead Peaks. I love when you arrive in the peaks, and I don't know if narrative had any part to do with this, but the Zephyrite choir and the Oreen chorus,
Yeah.
it's in my bones, that whatever that tune is, whatever that, like, it adds like a harmonic, like a metaphorical harmonic to the experience. And
Yeah.
then when
Yeah.
that got brought into the actual boss music for the confrontation, and it's so it's amazing. And of course, Oreen's death. I mean, I don't want to say of course because it's huge, but you know, everyone knows about it. Like, it's such an exclamation point. Anyway, I was impressed all over again at how well done the Kralkatorix end was, orchestrated narratively and technologically. And I heard you say that, I don't remember if you said this earlier in this conversation or if I heard you talk about it somewhere else, but about
Mhm.
how there was an effort to kind of pull out all the stops for this one to make sure that there was a satisfying arc because
Oh yeah.
of just not knowing where things were going to go in terms of the long-term content direction after that. And that was readily apparent. And it's just, I don't know. From this gamer, I just gotta say congratulations on that, because I don't often go back and revisit MMO story experiences and feel affected again.
Mhm.
I don't see it very often. And
Well, on behalf of the team that made those things, thank you for all of that. That would is the sort of thing that would make any of us feel mushy because that's exactly the sort of reaction that we hope for. I mean, we want to affect people,
yeah,
um, and and uh, and uh, all of those things again that you just said that weren't all just narrative choices, as you noted. I mean, for
yeah.
example, the music, and I wish that I knew specifically which composer, did which piece so that I could credit them
Oh yeah, I
specifically by
should look it
name.
up. Mhm.
I know Nick McLean Deemer on the stuff at the end of episode 5,
Mhm.
excuse me, episode 6, War Eternal. But other than that, I couldn't be specific. But our composers are astonishing, for sure. I mean, all of our creatives. I never cease being amazed at their artistry and their craft and the ideas they come up with. Um, and yeah, it is, I think it's known at this point. I mean, there was a swing for the fences sort of sense to season 4 because we weren't sure what was going to happen. I'll just say it. I'll put it that
Sure, sure.
way. And so we wanted, if that was sort of the end of that of that sort of way of doing content, then we
Mhm.
wanted it to feel complete
Yeah,
and like a really satisfying end point had been reached. um and there were a lot of other interesting choices that you make, that end up landing a little different than you expect them to, or stuff. I mean, I already talked about how we hadn't really planned for the first half of season 4 to be mostly about Joko, but it sort of just turned out that way,
yeah.
and that was great, in a number of different senses. But it also just meant that we had to move through the arc into
Had to power
3
through it.
episodes rather than more than that, right?
Right.
And so, uh, one thing that comes to mind, about those last 3 episodes, which are just gorgeous, in so many ways.
Yeah.
There's so many wonderful writers who work. Samantha is one. Neil, lots of folks, lots of really good writers, many of whom are no longer with us at the moment. But I think that so first, all right. So first, let's talk about All or Nothing, episode 5.
Yep.
Because the thing about it is that, and I don't know if you felt this, you knew what was coming this time, right?
Yeah. It's called All or Nothing.
People playing it, yeah. Well, for people playing it at the time, though, of course, they knew two things.
Yeah.
They knew that Aurene had over and over again about how she kept seeing visions of how this is going to play out, and they all ended the same way.
Okay.
In exactly the same position.
Right.
Right. And the other thing that they knew was that there was no way we're going to let that happen. That Guild Wars 2 is a game that doesn't mean it when you die. That most of the time you succeed at the thing you're trying to do of some sort. And I remember I love the day of streamer reaction. Particularly Peachy is one of my go-tos because she's always on our wavelength story-wise. She's very good at picking up what we're trying to do and sort of anticipating where we're going and kind of calibrating her expectations to that.
Sure.
And I remember her playing the end and playing that amazing sequence where you think you've killed Kralkator finally after a 45-minute battle in different parts of that damn cavern.
Right.
Then he comes back to life and are between you, and they have the beam thing happen, and then you're blown backwards, and it's a mix of gameplay and cinematic stuff, and it's all very chaotic. And as I've done before, I want to give full credit to Cameron Rich, who is the designer who we thought the last 2 minutes of this have to be a cinematic. They have to be. There's no way we can do it justice. And Cam came and got us out of a meeting and said, I mocked it up. I think we can do it in game.
Seriously.
Yeah, and the thing was, this is one of our principles, and it was even at the time, is everything's better if you can play. That's one thing video games have over, right? If I'm participating actively, if I'm living it, it's more impactful than if I'm. I know some video game companies that are very successful disagree with.
Makes you think of Half-Life, that kind of vibe. Always love that.
Yes, which is where I got that idea from. Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Half-Life, there are no cinematics in Half-Life. It is seamless, and yet there are moments in it that are completely cinematic, but I'm always an active participant.
Right.
Yes. Paradigmatic example for me.
Okay.
The work that they do. I'm very influenced by them. As much as I admire some that make what could fairly be described to some degree as playable movies, I think that they're putting more effort to trying to get the medium to do things that we are not best at and not maximizing the things that we are best at uniquely than I personally want. So Cam knows all that. Cam comes to us and says, I mocked it up. And he pulls us over, and it's in terrible shape. Come on. Obviously, it's like 4 months before you saw it. It was, roughed in and scratch audio, and every possible thing about it was temp. And it would make you cry as we watched him play it. Yeah. And damned if he wasn't right, and it was amazing and awesome. Do it in game, make him live it, make it hurt as bad as he can, right? And so you have that marvelous sequence where you wake up and your comms are fritzed out. You can't really hear everybody coherently. Yeah. We intentionally screw with your ability to move and walk and stuff, so you're slow and you're hobbling and there's this growing sense of dread. The audio design, because you were knocked 50 yards back from where you were, and you don't know what happened. You don't know what the outcome of that huge confrontation was. Right. That was so literally explosive. And then you hear people weeping, and you pass Zafira, I think, who is sort of
muttering to
has her
herself.
little Legolas moment of sort of going, post Gandalf dying. I think was for me what that always looked like was her having that
Interesting.
moment of how did that happen? How did that happen?
Yeah, this can't be right.
And
it wasn't supposed to happen this
yeah,
way.
and you see Braham in the sort of the opening to the big cavern, and he's like, "Oh, Commander, good. Oh, I'm glad you're okay." And you're like, I don't remember what the commander said. Something, Aurene, how is she? I don't remember. He's just like, he doesn't really answer, and he turns around, and he walks back into it, and you follow him in there, and you hear Tiny crying, and you see Aurene, stabbed on the brand spikes in exactly the same position that she always saw, that you've seen in her visions. And I remember Peachy going, "Oh my God, they did it." I mean, I knew they were going to do it. They said they were going to do it over and over again, do it, and then they did it. Why was that so shocking, right? Because we're so conditioned to expect that our heroes will somehow figure out a way to save the day. And so what I'll say about that, vis-a-vis the first 10 minutes of episode 6, War Eternal, is that even we were not prepared for the extent to which we had succeeded there. People were so affected, and we had managed over 5 episodes to get them to buy into the idea that, stakes are real and people can really die. And we told you Aurene was going to die, and then she did. And people were like, wow, that's amazing. And mind you, this is around the same time that like Game of Thrones is coming to its end and Avengers Endgame is coming. And like it would have been so nice to have all of these things to learn from that we knew were trying to sort of, bring things to an end in the same way we were. But it was all happening contemporaneously. So we couldn't. We were on our own. We were sailing blind. We were making choices. And they would work out. And if you have played War Eternal, you know that 10 minutes in as you revisit the scene of Aurene's death, she is still transfixed in that Pietà-like pose. And as you said, there are choirs there singing to her rest. Everybody is still broken up and everything. And 10 minutes in, basically the Joko in her that she ate kicks in, and she starts to come back to life with a little help. And to us, this felt very natural and expected. This is a thing. Of course, that's what's going to happen, right? We didn't realize we had actually played it. She was dead for real. And they had like grieved and they had dealt with it. And they were like, they embraced it as a dark thing.
Sold it.
You know what I mean?
Y'all sold
we did.
It, yeah.
And like, I mean, the team, just the work they do is amazing. And so people, I think understandably, were a little bit like, well, wait. Like she's alive already. And to us, we were like, well, yeah, don't you just want to jump to that part and get back in the game? Yeah. And they were like, no, we would have liked to like make it happen somehow. Couldn't we have like, and we were like, oh yeah, that would have been good. You know what I mean? Like,
great idea.
I mean, sometimes you just like, we have to think in advance about what we think is going to play and how it's going to play, right? Everything is in our imagination. And we don't really know. All we have to go on is how we feel about it. And we really do want to give our players stuff that's going to, make them crazy love the game and love the experience. And if we realized that, if we'd realized how successfully we had sold it, then I think we would have designed War Eternal a little differently. And we would have given you good first third of it with something you having to go and find the things, somehow get the Joko magic to kick back in, to maybe there's a chance,
build the idea in your mind that it was possible that she could come back.
Yes, but to make to do the game thing, to let you do it, right? Like I just said, it's everything's better if you let the player do it.
Right.
We just didn't realize how badly they'd want it. And in retrospect, that's a thing I really learned from. I think we all did, and we understood folks who were sort of like, because I remember even Peach was like, yeah, okay. Like the whole time leading up to Aurene reviving, she's like, they're not going to do this, are they? Are they really going to do it? Like, it's this, really? And they did, and then we did it, and then she's like, oh, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we did it, and then she's like, okay. And then we yeah, okay, I liked it anyway, but I knew it was coming, you know.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I think a lot of people had that. They were like, okay, I basically knew this is what's going to happen, but I'm not going to lie and say that I'm happy about it, you know.
Right,
Um,
right.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just, you know, like I said, it's a wild ride always. We're on, especially with Living World, we're on a plane that is flying in the air that we are constantly building as we fly.
Right.
And we do the best we can to anticipate how stuff is going to hit people and how they're going to perceive it and what kind of impact it's going to have. And you know, that is not to say that we don't make choices that are going to make people in one sense unhappy. I very much believe in that. One
Mhm.
story I love to tell, there's a great oral history of The Wire, the show The Wire,
Yeah.
which in my opinion is maybe the greatest 1 hour drama made for television ever. And in it, David Simon recounts how one of the young actors who played a young character who gets killed at some point. He doesn't say who it is, so I don't know. Comes to, but I'm guessing it could be the guy who played D'Angelo Barksdale. I'm not sure.
Mm.
Anyway, it came to him, like, he got the script for the next episode, and he saw that his player died, that his character rather died. And so he comes to David Simons, the showrunner's creator's office, and says, "Dude, what are you doing? How can you kill me? Everybody loves me. I'm like everybody's favorite show." And David Simon said, "I know, and that's why it has to be you, because you're the one that'll hurt most."
Mm.
Right? And I know that sucks. I do. And having to tell, I am sure, I've known Jocelyn Blue for 20 years, so I'm sure telling her, whoever had to tell her that Aaron was dying, did not have a happy experience doing that. And she still gives me shit about it to this day. She's still unhappy about it, and I don't blame her. When I had to tell Tommy Earl Jenkins that Blish, who we'd only just introduced, was going to sacrifice himself after 3 episodes, that was a hard thing to say because he is a brilliant actor, and I loved the character. Oh my God, I loved the
Yeah.
character.
Yeah. Blish
But
was a
again,
really, really interesting person.
yeah, who we didn't get to spend enough time with, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And this is one area in which I'm always the. Can we bring Blish back? I think we should bring Blish back. And everybody else is to me like, no, he stays dead. Okay. I'm like, okay, but I'm just saying, I have a perfect scenario for it in my head, which they've all heard, and so far they haven't taken me up on. But it, you know, like I very much believe in that, like you know, true making your audience truly satisfied does not mean always giving them the thing they want, because they
Right.
don't always know the thing that they really want, or the thing that will impact them the most strongly.
Right.
That's where your expertise and experience comes in, and you make those choices, and you hope that it works the way that you thought it would,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully you succeed more times than you don't. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, I would love for people to understand that aspect of our process better, so that they understand. I've never been enough to be a part of a thing like what happened with the ending of Mass Effect 3, but I knew a lot of the Fireware, and my heart really went out because
Yeah.
everybody sort of treated that in this kind of George Lucas screwed over my childhood kind of way.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, you know, you've got to understand, whenever you're thinking about choices that any creative person has made in a piece of art, a piece of creative entertainment that you're enjoying, that you're, you know, consuming, you have to understand they're human beings making the choices that seem best to them in the moment, and they're
Mm-hmm.
not always going to be right.
Mm-hmm.
And they're certainly not always going to be right for everyone, right?
Yeah.
So I may make you happy, but I may make somebody else pissed off. I mean, my wife still has never seen the last few episodes of The Wire because Omar was her favorite character. And once they killed Omar rather suddenly in a way that I
Mm.
thought was perfect, but she was like, I'm out. I can't forgive them. I'm done. So the David Simon
Uh,
lost a viewer.
yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
I mean, you make those choices, and you hope that they land the way you want. But either way, what you more hope is people don't love the choice, that they do respect and understand the place from which you are making it, right?
Right.
None of us makes a choice hoping to piss off the fan base. That is not how we go about our jobs.
Mm-hmm.
We make choices every day, juggling 1,000 different considerations of how much money and time and people we have to work with, and on top of all of that, what do we think is the thing that people and make them love our game more? And hopefully we succeed more often than we fail. I flatter myself to think that we have. I've been here, but I know also there have been times where we did our best and we didn't necessarily, for one reason or another, a fair number of players came away feeling like, I don't know that I felt satisfied by that, And sometimes we were able to predict it. Frankly, we did the best we could, and we knew that there were going to be some folks who wouldn't necessarily. Other times, it's taking us off guard.
Okay.
But it's part of the process. It's part of the it's part of the experience. But we're always what I can tell people for sure, and I do, is that we're doing it from a genuine place.
Right.
We think it's going to work for you, and if it doesn't, we're sorry. We did the best.
And that's what you just said right there is the reason why I make time and try to figure out how to have these conversations. I think like the greatest thing about video games is they're all made by people. And I think that it's not always obvious to people sitting down and playing them, right? It's all made by people for people, and the game is just in between, man.
Yep.
I thought a lot about that when I saw how the Icebrood Saga, the big payoff at the end of it, came to a head with Jormag and Primordus, and I think you said a little bit ago about how there have been some changes to the way that the rest of that saga would be delivered. It seemed like it happened, if I remember right, around the time that End of Dragons was announced. When I was talking to Bobby, he said to me, like, the way he told me the way he said it was, we got a chance to work on an expansion, so we needed to make some changes. And
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, and it makes sense to me. Like, I get it.
Yeah. I mean, without getting into specifics too deeply, I'll just say the obvious and underscore what Bobby said, which is, we have a certain amount of people, and a certain amount of resources in general that we plus we've all been working from home for the last 14 or 15 months, which is challenging in its own ways.
It is hard, especially for a very collaborative environment like you need for a video game.
Yeah, we're fortunate that we're able to do it as well as we are. There are enough things about what we make that we can do it this way, but it certainly isn't. And that doesn't even take into account, the stresses and emotional sort of stuff that all of us who are dealing with this have dealt with. Everybody in the world.
Yeah, it's a massive tragedy.
But yeah, I mean, when we started, End of Dragons was not yet a thing that was in the works. It was not a plan. And when it became one, obviously, that opportunity was very exciting. But it also, that's a thing that takes, a lot of resources. And so we had to figure out how we these things, how are we going to try to, finish the Icebrood Saga, for people while still beginning to work on this other thing, which we know is going to be a little farther down the line, but which also will be a thing people will really like. Making video games, just like making movies or TV shows or anything like that, is like, is a series of those kinds of choices you have to make. You always, unless you're James Cameron, basically, you always have, to some degree, limited limited technology, and you have to figure out how best to accomplish all of the creative goals that you've got. And when you're talking about video games, there are other goals that aren't creative too. They're, commercial and how do we make sure that we're giving people enough reasons to replay content? How do we make sure that we're adequately serving them with festivals and raids and stuff in the gem store and all of those things. Like, there are lots of different parts of an MMO experience. It's not just about the actual storyline, right? The narrative context, going back to what I said a while back, the narrative context permeates everything. But, the sort of golden path main story, which has become the story of Arene, basically. It wasn't planned that way to begin with, but that's sort of what we settled on as the through line for everything. That's a focus for us, and but it's not the whole thing. And so
Yeah.
we just always, like you always do, you got to figure out how to make the thing you want to make with the resources you have and the time you have.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he's right. It's a good way to put it. We need to change some things plans were, and how we were planning to deploy people and stuff like that. And we've done that. But that's without getting too deeply into it. Again, we had already committed for Icebrood Saga to, with season 4, we were lucky if we got episodes out every 3 months. We frequently didn't make that even, right? It was more like every 3.5 months, or on a couple of occasions every 4 months. And so we really, for Icebrood Saga, we wanted to do a better job of hitting those marks and saying, okay, we're going to do it every 2 months, and we're going to hit it, and we did. And my hat's off to our production staff for helping us make that happen. And that, of course, also though necessitated, obviously, you got a month or more or less to work on everything, so it's going to have to be a little bit of a smaller thing,
more modest. Yeah.
Hopefully, the whole thing is the same size. You're just you're changing the way that you're breaking it up.
Smaller
and
bites.
Then we had some. That's right. And then we had some new ideas, some kind of different things we wanted to do in terms of structure of it. We wanted to have a prologue episode that was sort of its own segue out of the events of season 4 into Icebrood Saga.
Yeah.
We knew that we wanted to do the visions thing where we wanted to give you the opportunity to play as a different character than the commander, and thereby let you experience.
I like that a lot.
Oh, I thought it was great. Let you experience perspectives on stuff that you hadn't been privy to the first time you played it, right? It's sort of a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead kind of approach, and I always love stuff like that. And Quan, that was one of Quan's big early kind of things that was his thing, and he just did a marvelous job on it. And that was another situation where we got to make him fall in love with the warband man. Got to make them fall in love with the warband, because every damn one of those people is going to die, and it's got to hurt when they do.
I'm beginning to see the way things work in Tom's brain.
Yeah.
Make them love so you can make them hurt.
Oh man.
Well,
how many times? I would just say, how many times have we made Julie Nathanson die? I feel bad just thinking. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I've heard you describe narrative. You mentioned earlier its context and meaning, and I think that probably, and this is my very unsophisticated outsider take, but it seems to me that people understand when the meaning that's being presented that isn't a real reflection of the way humans make meaning socially, collaboratively. We're all storytellers in some way. What's the famously reductive saying about consciousness, that our consciousness is just reality is a story that your brain tells you about yourself, right? It's the idea that we all perceive the world through our eyes and ears and our senses. Like, it's fundamentally a subjective experience.
Right, sure, yeah.
Storytelling is our way to check in on each other. But
that's a great way of thinking about it.
And like, just reflecting. So about the what you were saying about having to make the changes when End of Dragons became a priority. It sounds a little bit almost like the situation you described with Caithe being the voice of Aurene, and then the Dragonflight. It's like you had a great idea, but then an even better idea came along.
Yeah,
and you had to find the right compromise.
Yep. Yeah, because because your resources are never infinite, and so you have to make choices, and you have to decide, okay, what's gonna give the bigger payoff ultimately. What's gonna make the players. We have to make choices to try to give as much enjoyment to the players as we can. What do we think is the thing that's going to do that? Again, that doesn't mean we're going to always choose correctly, but we make our choices in the most informed way that we can.
Yeah.
And with the very much with the players' satisfaction at the core of what our goals are, and do the best, make the best story, make the best experience that we can, sort of working with those cards. And like I say, I think I'm really impressed, and I'm in no way taking credit. I mean, it's all I do is sit back and occasionally go, yeah. right? I mean, what I get to do, my job is building a team of amazing people, and then getting the joy of watching them do what they do, and just making sure that they're set up to succeed and have everything they need to be able to explore their own potential to the fullest and do amazing stuff. And they have never disappointed me yet, and I feel very fortunate, very lucky to have been able to put together a group of people who could accomplish something like the stuff that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
I think it is very special. I know that MMOs are famously hard to get into if you didn't at the beginning. That's easier than it is of many for a number of reasons. But it's a thing we know and we've been trying to figure something about, and hopefully we're going to come up with some solutions. But for that reason, the only thing that makes me sad is I don't think nearly played and appreciated the last 2 seasons of our Living World content as I wish had, because I think people would have loved it if they had been there and prepared to do it. But I also know that MMOs are a big time investment. It's not like playing Miles Morales for 10 hours and then being done with it. And so, I get it, but I couldn't be prouder of the work folks have done. It's all, to me as a player and an audience member, it's incredibly moving stuff.
Well, Tom, I think that's probably a great point for us to end it on tonight.
Well, it's been a absolutely fantastic and enjoyable discussion. Thank you. I didn't anticipate how much fun this would be. I want to say too, I appreciate the thoughtfulness with which you sort of think about all of this. That's not redundant. Because there's nothing more gratifying to somebody who does the sorts of things that I do than that somebody spends as much time thinking about the work that I and people that I work with have done as we've done thinking about the work that we're making. Right. That's as high a compliment and as gratifying a reward as we could possibly ever hope for. And thanks very much for that. I really appreciate it.
It's a compliment I gladly pay. Gladly. Well, Tom, I want to give you, I usually give people a chance right at the end to promote anything. Guild Wars 2 is out there. Anything else you want to mention?
Well, so I'll just underscore, if you've checked the pinned tweet under the Guild Wars 2 Twitter account, you know that we've laid out sort of a calendar for the summer of different releases that are coming. One of the things we're doing is turn where the seasons 2, 3, 4, and 5 back with new achievements, new things to unlock, new goodies and reasons to play again, and also just like you did. That's right, and like you did, just so you can sort of reacquaint yourself with stuff that happened for players subjectively, in some cases 6-7 years ago, and that is awesome because the phrase "end of dragons" is provocative, I know.
Yeah.
And I know that everybody wants to know what the hell it's about and what it means. And as we have 7th, you will find out some more stuff.
Okay.
And we are looking forward to that. There are plans in the works. Ruby is hard at work figuring out what that day is going to look like, and other folks on that team and the marketing team. And it's going to be super exciting. And it will be our first chance to really give folks a real look beyond the little teaser trailer that we have released. A real sense of sort of what we may be doing with all of this. We're super excited. It's super excited. It's going to be really fun, and can't wait for people to get their hands on it. So looking forward to July 27th. We all are with bated breath, and also, just as I said, my little side project I've got going. I didn't start it. I'm fortunate enough to have been asked to participate in a sort of experimental project that is an attempt to fuse live theater performance and filmmaking and interactivity a la video games in the process of deconstructing the work of Anton Chekhov in a project that we call Chekhov OS. It features Mikhail Baryshnikov playing Anton Chekhov himself. It features his daughter Anna Baryshnikov, who is a regular on Dickinson, and Jessica Hecht, who is a great theater star and who I first got to know on I think it was Desperately, no, what was that show called? Suddenly Susan, I think, if I remember.
Suddenly Susan sounds
sitcom
right.
from the 90s.
Yeah,
sitcom from the 90s. She's a marvelous actor, and a bunch of other actors who you will know from different shows. Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, all sorts of stuff. You'll recognize a lot of the faces in it.
Okay.
And there's live performance going on. Each time we do it is a live event done through Zoom. And if you're interested, you can go to chekhofos.art and reserve a place. And I think the next one is actually, I think they just did one actually this evening that I didn't attend. I think the next one is Sunday morning, 8 o'clock Pacific, 11 o'clock Eastern, because it's mostly intended for some folks who are going to be watching in Europe. So that's why it's earlier in the day.
Makes sense.
We have several more shows, though. They're all on the website if you're interested in checking it out. It is a work in progress. Where it's going, we're not sure. But we've gotten a lot of attention. The New York Times picked up what our Zero Gravity Lab is doing with our previous production that was called The State versus Natasha Bettina. And we're trying to do an interesting new thing in a way that is. I mean, there are a few other people who've been trying to do it during the pandemic, but we're doing it in a way that is more comprehensive and farther reaching and pushing the boundaries of all of more than anything else that I'm aware of, and it's awfully fun to be able to be a part of it. I wrote everything in the show that's not Anton words are words that were written or rewritten by me, and that's my contribution to it. And I'm the game part. I'm bringing video game knowledge aspect to it. So that's the thing people can check out if they want to. We're proud of it, but we're going to keep working. Who knows where it will lead in the future?
Rad and uncertain sounds right up your alley, Tom.
Yep, it is. It is. It's a good thing to have going on the side. I'm not usually a side project guy. I like being very totally invested in my main thing, but it's been nice for the past few months to have this as a thing to, it's been, 30 years since I had anything to do with the theater in any significant way. And so it's a really fun way for me to return to my roots.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah. I'm lucky.
Yeah. Well, we're lucky for having had a chance to sit down and talk. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
I'm Deeg TV on Twitch, Deeg everywhere else. You can find me. I'm easy. Thank you again, everyone else. Have a good night, and we'll see you next time. Actually, next week I'll be interviewing ex-ArenaNet developer Josh Foreman, famous for Super Adventure Box. Very much looking forward to that. Very creative soul.
Say hi to Josh for me.
I definitely will.
Awesome.
And 2 weeks from today, or from, I think 2 weeks from today, it's in 2 weeks, Cameron Rich is coming on. So I'll be able to follow up where we picked up.
Him about, that's right. That's right. That's awesome. That's awesome. I want to watch that. I want to hear his version of all of that. But he's a tremendously talented guy. And the guts that it took for him to come to us and say, I believe I can do this. I've mocked it up. Come look. I mean, it was I had mad respect. Also, he kills at karaoke.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
Ooh. I love me some karaoke. That's great. Well, I'm super excited about that. That's going to be awesome. Thanks again, Tom. And have yourself a great night.
My pleasure.
Thanks,
you
everyone.
Too. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for anyone who hung in.
Definitely.
3.5 hours.
Absolutely.